Welcome everyone to GSL Group C, round of 16, Group C. For the first preliminary match, we do have Special versus Dark. So a very tough first round match for Special. Dark being one of the best Zergs in Korea, if not actually the best Zerg. I would say that he, it's not that controversial to say that he is the best Zerg in Korea. It'd be a little more controversial to say he's the best Zerg in the world, especially as other Zergs continue to perform better in bigger tournaments than he does. Not that he hasn't gotten his fair share of final appearances and, you know, actual victories in tournaments. But yeah, he is certainly one of the best players in the world. Special certainly has a lot of things going for him, a lot of tournament results, a lot of fun play styles, a lot of fans, legacy in both StarCraft 2 as well as Brood War. He was playing Brood War at a very high level as like a kid, basically. But he's never really been able to put that to the big stage and actually win a championship. The farthest he gotten in a very prestigious tournament was BlizzCon. So more accurately, the WCS finals at BlizzCon, you know, whatever. But he did get to the round of 4 in BlizzCon 2017, which was an awesome result and was seemingly going to pave the way for like his future, right? Like now we get to expect him as one of the strongest non-Koreans in StarCraft 2, but it didn't really pan out that way. He certainly dominates his region, that was Latin America, whenever he played in the regional tournaments, but didn't actually dominate the combined North America regional of the previous season. So Special really is coming in here as an underdog. Fortunately, I do believe that Special is one of the best Terrans when it comes to preparation. He certainly has the ability to play a lot of different styles, and he's very flexible. He's also willing to do these things as well, so he doesn't just say, like, this is the best way to do it. And I think part of that is because he actually does believe the best thing for Terran, especially in this matchup, is to be different all the time, right? So, you know, coming from his history, being in the Brood War scene and kind of being part of that mentality of Brood War players, which was in some ways stubborn. You know, you practice an insane amount of hours, if you practice less than 16, you're being a little lazy, you know. This is the best way to do it, and only those who are incredibly talented can make a different way to do it, right? Those are one in a million. He could have been like an Idra. Absolutely. I could have seen that happening, actually. He could have been just like, no, this is the best way you got to do it, and like nothing else is going to work. But Special did not turn out that way, and actually kind of lives up to his name, the name that he finally actually stuck on, because we know he's had a billion names. He's got some special tactics. And right now we're seeing a factory expand in a TVZ with a double Reaper opener, low ground wall off, but not the 2 racks like you would see maybe Beyond do, and then literally every production facility in the natural as well, which is actually kind of funny. The Overlord does go ahead and just move on over. Not a big deal, but I wonder if there's any other benefit to doing that. Perhaps the Zerg player would be often less likely to send the Overlord in at this time. But then the Overlord doesn't actually have to scout this, does it? And the Overlord didn't have to die, by the way. This is a mistake on Dark's part. Dark could have easily seen the triple production facilities and been like, okay, gotcha, and then left. He stayed around far too long. But I was going to say that even if the Overlord didn't see this, Lings would. Lings at the front of the base would see all of this. So I'm actually really wondering why this is a thing. I guess ultimately it comes down to swapping the add-ons, doesn't it? So the barracks is obviously placed there to wall off, and then the reactor gets swapped to the factory as usual, and then the factory at a tech lab to swap off to the starport as well. Yeah, okay, that's literally the reason. He just needed to place his buildings close to each other. Third to see is on the way, on the high ground. Ultimately, this build turned into a double Reaper harass into Medevac Cyclone Marine drop, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, and it really isn't. But with the Cyclone, there is a chance of grabbing a Queen, for instance, which is a nice grab. Oh, just kidding, actually. Clutch transfuse. But it also could have gone after an Overlord, and that's, I think, usually what you're more so hoping for, especially as you run across the map with the medevac. It might have seen an Overlord here, or an Overlord over there, or something along those lines. It did not. However, Dark did manage to still be a little supply blocked, just with how weird things were going, I suppose. Perhaps the Overlord death over here did interrupt his flow, because he had 5 Overlords coming out at, like, 82 supply or something like that, as he was blocked. So that's fixed. We're all good. And Dark is taking very minimal damage from Special's special opener. But Special is not done yet. He's also added on 4 Hellions after swapping that factory on, and is also looking to harass with them. So you got Hellions on the left, medevac into the main base, or on the right side. Oh, triple harass. Excuse me. A Raven also popped out and immediately went across the field. I thought I saw a Raven still in production, and I did. There are 2 Ravens on the field. This is not something that Special hasn't done before, but I don't know if he's ever done all of this at the same build. I'm not completely sure about that. I definitely remember him going into double Raven builds, and he's always been the more likely Terran to go into a single Raven build in TDZ as well. But I don't know if the double Raven was like Cyclone, medevac drop, and Hellion drop apparently going down as well. Raven does manage to survive, and the Hellions are now diving on in to get some drone damage. Good splits from Dark as he handles the continuous pressure fairly well. 5 drones go down, a total of 11. That is a hefty chunk of change. Of course, that Overlord and a handful of Lings that I guess died to some of the defense somewhere. I didn't really see, to be honest. Maybe the auto turret in the main base. And the auto turret can keep on being spammed here. It's not as abusive as it once was. If you all were back in the days of Abyssal Reef, the Raven auto turret had a bigger cast range. It was either 2 or 3, I don't quite remember, but that was very abusive. And by cast range, it means, like, you know, the Raven, as of right now, has 1 cast range, so it has to go, like, here to slap the auto turret down here. It used to be able to slap the auto turret down here from, like, here, which is, you know, a big difference when the queens can't literally just stay there. All right, Dark did have his queens there, expecting the harassment, but you got to get them back to injecting and creep spreading, and they're usually helpful in the front lines in most of the battles of TDZ. So Special's been applying all of this pressure. A little supply block himself, actually. He's going to be doing a little bit too much. 3rd CC is down, getting saturated, however, and now we're on to the Marine phase. Not quite 16 Marines, but still wanted to apply, again, more pressure. Is Cyclone still alive? Not sure what it's doing. I just hopped up the 3rd. All right. And we do have upgrades on the way as well. Dark finally started up his own upgrades too. Cervical Hooks is on the way, and an Infestation Pit as he looks towards a hive. Dark is a Zerg player who is more prone than others to go into roaches, but this is not one of his roach games. Good old-fashioned Ling Baneling it is. And I guess on that note as well, Special might also be showing us some mech in today's series. I'm not obviously saying that he will, because I don't know, but he does actually go for some mech builds. The amount of Marines I'm seeing being pumped out is rather odd. Yeah, 7 barracks. Interesting. So 5 with add-ons, and then 2 without. Eventually we'll get tech labs, I'm suspecting, but an interesting twist. So usually you go up to 8 barracks on 3 bases for a more dedicated, aggressive Terran, or you go right into a 4th CC, you know, either one. But 7 barracks instead of 8 is a little bit different, and I assume they came up a little bit faster to give them a little bit more Marines on the Marine count, which might be enough to throw Dark off. Not enough Banelings to really be enough. Well, hold on. Okay, yeah, 2 Banelings should have been sniped there. I was waiting for that moment, and yes, they are sniped. So the Baneling numbers were not high enough for Dark to actually take care of that. He takes away care of the tanks, usually the anchor, usually one of the biggest issues. But the Marines, as clumped up as they were and as safe as they were, are now slaughtering all of the Lings, all of the Queens. The Banelings will eventually form, and Special knows that, so he gets out of there, but he doesn't have to go very far. His reinforcements are on the way. He did lose 12 SCVs, I believe, to a Baneling run by, but Special's aggression seems to be working out here, as his SCV count's not even that low. His army supply is double that of his opponents, and he's getting 2-2, as Dark cannot afford his own 2-2, but yet prioritizes his adrenal glands. He did get to that hive. A very greedy hive in the context of the game, I guess, overall, but especially greedy now that he's taken the damage, right? I actually don't think it would have been impossible for him to defend better as he dived towards this hive. He just needed more Banelings or a better wraparound in the actual Marines of that defense, but that type of mistake can cost you the game as a Zerg player. chasing after the Terran army and losing the Baneling numbers. If there's just even 8 Marines left under 2 medevacs, having only Lings and Queens might not be enough to stem the momentum of the Terran player, and that kind of feels like it's happened here. Special is just full of momentum. Dark's gonna have to do one heck of a comeback, which is possible. You know, Special doesn't pay attention for one hot second, loses 24 Marines on the main base. Oh, burrowed Banelings also. Very good comeback mechanic. I like the burrow on the main base, because I doubt that Special is going to use a scan to get up here, but he does have a Raven. Literally right there. We had some Liberators harassing as well. Remember that earlier the Queens were all slaughtered, so we're down to literally 1 Queen, and she is on death's door. So no injects, no creep spread. Special, he really should have this game wrapped up. I think he just needs to consolidate his forces and go across the map. Oh, that's a weird mistake here. Fortunately, not going to cost him too big because he is so far ahead in the overall game. 2-2 is very close to finishing. Dark still a ways away. Dark's Lings are attacking faster, but they're not attacking particularly aggressive. They don't actually have a lot of damage on their speedy attacks. And even then, like, Adrenal Glands might be useful to tear down walls and buildings, but I doubt it's going to really help as long as the Marine count is this high. That's the Banelings. The Banelings have to come in here and actually deal with the Marine count. But the Lings, if they could get into the main base of Special and really cause a lot of chaos, they would be able to tear down, for instance, add-ons and SCVs very quickly. But they have yet been able to do that. They're still trying to find a point of counterattack or run by, and it's just not happening. Special seems very aware that Dark's only chance in this game is to get a very efficient run by, so he is determined to keep many of his units back at home, which means, again, he maybe is missing that opportunity to go for, like, the killing blow, everything just on the doorstep of Dark, but he was pretty scared about this one. And as a run by finally happens, it is rather unsuccessful. Dark tapping out as he reaches sub 100 supply. Special's very consistent pressure build, I think, really did throw Dark off. Because even though he seemed to be handling things as they came okay, I think the punch, you know, is a bunch of little jabs, and then the punch on his 4th base was just a little more than he was expecting, possibly going back to Special, adding in those couple extra barracks, going for a very dedicated 3-base build after all that aggression, as opposed to kind of slowing things down, going for a 4th CC. So that worked out. That worked out exactly as Special planned. His builds, when they work out as planned, look spectacular, right? They look like they are genius. However, and I might guess we see this in the next games of Special throughout this GSL group, his builds also have an unfortunate habit of kind of getting run off track. You know, a run by didn't account for, or a drop that he missed micros, and then it just falls apart. So this game was absolutely perfect. Big congrats to Special for making Dark look like a fool, but I'm sure that Dark will not fall so easily in the entire best of 3. Now we move on to Gresfon. In the top left, it is Special up a game. In the bottom right, it is Dark. And Dark really did get tripped up when it came to the more concrete attack, I guess you could say, right? So though I generally, in my casts, basically divide the attacks between like 2 types, which is the harassment-based and then the like actual potential killing blow based, right? So oracles basically are always harassment, but we have had metas where you get to 20 oracles, and that is actually a killing blow. But generally oracles are harassment, or a Hellion drop is harassment, but it could do damage that ends the game effectively, just not usually the point in which players are like, tap out immediately. They kind of like chug along even if they've lost 40 drones. So Special did a lot of harassment, and then he went for more of a killing blow, which are it's the Marine tank push is more of the potential killing blow if the Zerg player messes up, and Dark did mess up. He had a solid amount of units that could have conquered the army if everything went according to plan. So the Lings wrap around the tanks, and they wrap around the Marines. His Baneling number might be enough. But what he was lacking was the Baneling numbers in case he didn't get the wraparound, in case the Marines kind of squeezed themselves out, and then were able to snipe the Banelings, which they were almost late to, that they did. And then once the banelings were gone, we know that a pack of 20 Marines under medevacs usually takes the fight against almost any number of lings, almost. And the queens were actually pretty defenseless, so it went down to no banelings, no lings, no queens very, very quickly. And we just know that that is one of the biggest problems in this matchup, not balance-wise or design-wise. It's just the thing that the Zerg player really needs to take into account the most, especially when they're up against such momentum-based builds as basically like that was very akin to the 8 racks, the 3-base 8 racks, where again, a lot of the killing blows of the 8 racks dedicated attack is the, oh shit, I'm out of banelings. Like that's when the 8 racks works. So that was very akin to that, even though it was 7 racks, and I believe earlier on than a lot of like typical 8 racks attacks would happen, but it was very akin to that. Dark needed to make sure that he always had banelings on the reinforcement, and he did not. He threw everything he had at the attack to try and nip it in the bud, and it did not work, and he was doing that while being kind of greedy as well, going for that very quick hive. Now Dark did go for a pool first, which Special actually scouts, which is pretty nice. Thank you very much, Corsancho, for the Prime sub. So yeah, the SCV Scout, very good timing. Coincidental, you know, second game, SCV Scout, second game, pool first. But it's not a very dedicated pool first. We do have the lings hiding off to the bottom left. Speed is coming in maybe, you know, faster, yes, than a greedy opener from a Zerg player. But these faster speedling builds don't really have a lot of potential against someone who already walls off their natural. And I would say generally they don't really have a lot of potential against typical Terran builders either, because it's really just a... To me, it just seems like a Hellion check, like an attention check. Because when I say the speed is fast, I mean it's just faster than the hold off on the speed until you take your third base type of opener. Again, the greedier opener from the Zerg player, which many of them will do, assuming that they won't take a lot of damage in the early game. And they'll have the speed so ready for the time in which there are 4 Hellions, not just 2. So, yeah. I say faster as if it's like a 230 speed. It's not. It's just not the greediest speed timing. But at the end of the day, this pool first, this speed finishing up at the time that it did, it's just not very helpful for Dark, is it? So I would say not a particularly good start for Dark. Special probably pretty happy with everything that he's seen. He's like, ah, gotcha. SCV scouted when he pool first, so you can't even get your lings on my side of the map without me knowing. Perhaps they would have arrived to maybe chew on a couple of SCVs. Maybe the depots weren't up to wall yet, I'm not sure. But they just did absolutely nothing. And Special's going into a third CC once again. Is going into some Banshees as well, so changing things up from the last game for sure, because he's not going into the medevac drop, just right into the Hellions, into the Banshees. Actually far more of a typical looking TDZ 1-1-1 setup, just with that forward wall, right? So I feel like Special, yeah, I should be feeling pretty good about this game. Now Dark is not going to try and force the aggression. It maybe if he had gotten some momentum, the initial lings did find something, the faster speed did catch a attempted 2 Hellion drive-by, so on and so forth. Perhaps then Dark is trying to be aggressive, I guess, but no, Dark is chosen to play out the rest of this game. Very much macro-oriented. Drones on the way, spores to cover the starports, which it looks like he was barely able to scout. No, that's the stim, actually. Where's the starport? Here you are. I hate when you click on it. It's supposed to take you to what you click on, but if it's actually kind of close to you, it doesn't take you to what you click on. Anyways. So I don't actually know about it, but it looks like he's expecting it, because he is building spore crawlers. So without much scouting to be done, he doesn't have any overlords on this side of the map, and the ling would certainly be killed before it reached the main base here. He is just defaulting to a defensive posture. 3 spore crawlers, I think, would actually be a little overkill if he knew for a fact his opponent was only going for the 1 safety Banshee. So again, it just feels like Special, with his weirder openers and slight change-up in this game, is once again coming out ahead. Dark almost hurting himself, trying to make things different, trying to perhaps get the ball rolling on his side, right? By going for an earlier pool and whatnot, and he just kind of just fizzled. But Special is just la-di-dying, just doing whatever he wants. He's like, yeah, my build's awesome. I'm not even getting attacked. Like, maybe I'm not doing a whole lot, but I got my 3 CCs up. Like, lickety-split. I'm already moving on to bio and drops and tank pushes. Like, this is awesome. Where Dark is, yeah, again, kind of having to protect himself against a lot of unknowns. So the Spore Crawlers do help out against that one lone Banshee, but you really didn't mean to do anything. And the earlier game just feels a little more awkward for Dark. You know, right now, seeing as the drone count is equal or less than the SEV counts, this should not be a good game for Dark. Dark is a very good Zerg player when it comes to playing the lower econ situations, but that is often when he's playing a Roach style. And Roaches, when used correctly, can be very cost efficient. Ling Baneling literally cannot be. It just dies too quickly and is suicidal. So, Special... I mean, he's kind of lining things up, man. He's even catching these Lings as they try to nibble on the rocks. Now finding some queens. No transfuse. One queen goes down. Again, a very nice follow-up. A more typical follow-up as well for Special past the point of 3 bases. He did go into a fast 4th base, and in fact, it is an orbital on location at 7:30. It's kind of crazy. And this is happening so fast that it feels like it almost doesn't interrupt his momentum either. Usually that 4th base is a real signifier to slowing down the game, of course, compared to the 7 or typical 8 racks, right? And Special, by doing this so fast and without interruption, is like he doesn't lose a step, right? He just keeps on being aggressive. He keeps on pressuring. Very fast style of play here. Like, we're not seeing a lot of drops or a lot of splits, but no doubt about it, this is a very fast style of play. If you tried to copy it, you would no doubt fall behind. But Special is being a little overzealous on this attack. His tank on the high ground wasn't even sieged. However, the Banelings do not have speeds, and they're coming in rather awkwardly. But it looks like the Lings are going to be just enough to deal with the Marines. Now, that was probably a cost-efficient trade for Special, and he does come out ahead on the supply, but that was enough stuff there from Dark to take care of it. It would have been so much easier if the Banelings were involved, though. Those Marines were tucked into a corner. So, mistake from Dark still, but he might just be happy with being able to push Special back entirely. Very quickly goes back into spreading creep. He does have 5 bases set up. Yes, 5 bases set up with a 6th on the way as well. So while his drone count didn't explode and never was really all that much higher than Special's SEV counts, he is now at a very comfortable place for a Zerg player. So Special, I'd still say, took a cost-efficient engagement. Yeah, he did. The most important thing for Dark is that he just pushed it back. He's like, okay, now I have time to breathe. But Special's not going to give him too much time here. He's already moving out now with some added Marauders, adding some chunk to the composition. So the Banelings perhaps sometimes are even less dependable. Not a whole lot of splash, however, despite having a very quick second factory. That was around the same time he got his 4th base. He doesn't actually have that many Widow Mines or that many tanks. Oh, he has 7 Widow Mines, but they're not on the front lines. There we go. Now they're coming out. With Drilling Claws on the way. The next attack. Not this one, which is more of a drop, I guess, but the next attack might be a little feistier. Special is trying to split up his army, but without medevacs, he won't have a retreat on the top side. Some reinforcements back at home to help defend the run-by, but it is 2-1 Lings versus 1-1 Bio, so the 8 wraparounds are going to be pretty effective. Lings and Banelings also getting into the mineral lines. 13 SCVs go down. Natural also under attack. Special having to deal with this as well as try to pressure is going to lose out somewhere. And it looks like, barely not getting Banelings to the face, saving some of his units, but he has lost out back at home. Letting the Lings into every nook and cranny causes a lot of chaos and really increases the potential for damage, as you can see here. And then you add on Burrow, and it takes even longer to clean up, even more chaos, all taking away Special's potential momentum. Because Dark really did want to go for a momentum breaker in the last game. It was already too late. The damage had already been done. This time around, he was able to actually hold off against that first push, not make a super critical mistake, and then had the momentum breaker run by that he did not get in the last game. And that really is a big deal. Even though Special still has 4 bases up and running, orbitals too, by the way. This one managed to go unscathed with the Ling run by, and that was an open opportunity. he has lost a lot of momentum. So base count's great, SCV count is back up and running, and the army size is still considerable. But he has not been able to apply the same pressure, keep Dark under his thumb, like the last game. So Dark is going to have more opportunities for run-bys, a little more breathing room to get into this higher technology, so he actually has, for instance, 2-2 on his Lings. And I'm not sure how he's going to respond to the main army, but we'll find out in a second. This is actually turning a little weird for Special, as he managed to lift and lead with some of his frontline units, but he was actually reinforcing, and it almost looks like he forgot he was reinforcing, because those units were not on a move, and he could not join up the medevac army with the ground army. So that turned really awkward, really fast for Special. That just was a very unfortunate sequence of events. Special also a little vulnerable to the counterattack. Holds on, he's okay. Just had to lift the planetary or the orbital. Damn it, the command center. One of those things. The 3 medevacs in the main base do not find a lot of damage. They might have gotten a queen, perhaps 2 queens, I'm not sure, but that's not the biggest deal right now, as we're on a 12-minute game with 6 hatcheries for the Zerg player. Make that 7 with the macro hatchery as well. The queens are not so much a problem. Even the creep spread is still rather good, although it's certainly missing on this particular side. Liberator harassment starting to get set up here, and I do like that in addition to the bio attacks and drops. But I am noticing that they're also taking away from the potential medevac reinforcements. We are only at 2 medevacs. Special has also picked up on this, but nonetheless, it's going to take a little while to replace the medevac count as you would want it to be. So with a really mass bio army, less so about the wood mines and tanks, I feel like you'd want 8 medevacs. And he's only at 2. He's about to be at 3. The 2 that are alive are injured and out of juice. So with every stim, the Lings themselves, like only the Lings, have a better chance at killing these, right? Usually it's all about the Banelings making those connections, which if they do, fantastic. But now the Lings are also a threat. They also got some decent upgrades. His +3 attack finishes up. Parasitic Bomb took down the 1 or 2 medevacs that were available, 1 full of units. And Special is getting a little over-eager, I would say. So, I definitely think this is another build, another game in which, oh, Viper's cello! Viper number 1 goes down, number 2 barely saved. But yeah, Special wanted this to be a very, momentum game again, because, that's TDZ in general, isn't it? But he really wanted this to just go from start to finish, boom, 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 boom. And he played it so freaking fast that he was actually even able to slip in the very fast 4th command center. But it was fast, it was well-timed, and I still think he had the possibility of really starting up the momentum in his favor. But a couple of fights go wrong, a couple of missed micros, and suddenly everything goes to shit. Dark just has too much going on for Special to take the fights that he's looking for. He has to respond to run-bys and surrounds and Lings jumping on top of his army before he thinks that they're going to be able to, so he's not ready to engage. He's trying to do harassment, but without the medevac count from earlier because he's lost them doing drops and all that good stuff, so it's a little too much everywhere at once. And it's when you start just kind of throwing, not even haymakers, right? It's not even haymakers right now. They're both kind of like slap fighting almost, It's not the prettiest fight in the world. They both are picking up, just globs of mud and throwing it at each other. I do think when the Zerg player gets to do that, it is a little better for them. It does depend on the compositions and the context of the game, of course, but I do think that when you just get to kind of throw Lings around and Banelings around and jump on the Terran when they're not expecting and whatnot, that it does sometimes favor them. Of course, if they start taking fights of 20 Lings versus 40 Marines because they're not paying attention, well, that's not good. But in terms of the mud wrestle that we're currently seeing, Special has really lost his grip on his opponent. And Dark is not exactly holding on super well, but he is holding on better, I would say. A drop to the top right is trying to find that damage, but again, we got some very injured units. Another loss of medevacs as well. Not a particularly good drop as only 9 drones went down. Dark could definitely recover from that. Excellent bungle on the backside as well. And the Widowmine friendly fire. At this point, Special is just not getting any good fights. That one actually looked like it might have been okay, but the Infestor backstab was brilliant. That was an okay number of units with medevacs actually healing, but that Infestor fungal was fantastic. And Special is trying to expand still, and I do got to give kudos to that. Again, playing a very fast game, so his 4th base extraordinarily fast. His 5th did get set up pretty quickly despite a little interruption. And his other base coming forward here wants to kind of go alongside this idea of momentum. So he wants the attack to be consistent, and he also wants his expansions to be consistent. So suddenly, before Dark knows it, he's overwhelmed, not just on the field with army fights, he's also overwhelmed with how the map has been taken. You know, you blink and you miss it, and then suddenly the Terran has more bases than you do. And you're like, oh shit, that's not good. But Dark is at least holding this command center off a little bit, and the burrow continues to be annoying. That has actually been something going on consistently that I have not really been able to talk about, but Dark's always been burrowing units. Lings to be a bother, Lings to scout, Banelings try and get some Baneling mines. They haven't really worked out. The scans have been available, but this also means that we probably have not had big mule drops. So Special probably should have had, in a more typical game, 2 or 3 mass mule drops. Let's say 4 or 5 mules on fresh bases, and he probably just hasn't in this game, if I had to guess. Dark's composition has evolved into a very late game one. Ling, Baneling, Ultra, Viper, and Infestors. And he is super good with the Infestors, and that burrow is really helping them out, too. Both of them upgraded completely on 3-3-3-3. No move towards Aspire or the like for Dark. He is content on his composition. However, he is adding on a Nidusworm, which I think is a great option. I mean, he basically... That is actually how you play Zerg nowadays. If you're into a late-game TVZ and you're not getting Nidusworms, you're the one making a mistake. And there's a lot of dead space in Special's main base, so an Overlord could easily get over there. Marauders without the heals on the front line, just getting chewed up by these cracklings. And honestly, the lack of medevac still seems to be an issue. There's enough on the field for a big consolidated army attack, like one right here, snipes the base and is able to escape. But running around the top side of the map with medevac-less units means there's no escape for them and no healing, so it's much easier for Dark to take care of it. And Dark has actually moved from taking care of the top side drop to moving on to Special's 3rd base, possibly even to his natural. 20 SCVs are down. This base also under attack. The tank is barely out of range. Where are the army units? There they are. Medevacs came all the way home, now dropping to try and block out the Ultras. But that's not really working out here. The army number is not big enough as more units have to drop out. There's the Marauders that can now block the Ultras' retreats. Dark's gonna just send into the main base to buy as much time as possible. The planetary did fall, by the way. Perhaps the Banelings came in as well. 40 SCVs down. 2 planetaries about to fall as well. Dark now conquering the army supply. And, yeah, there we go. Now conquering the army supply. He's certainly conquering the overall supply. Special went down to 24 SCVs, ending with the fungal and ensuring the battle went his favor. Causes Special to finally tap out. That just did not go according to plan for Special. And it started with some of his initial attacks. Because I think as far as the beginning of the game, the 4-base setup was brilliant. It was fast. It was in pace with the attacks. So there was never that point of stoppage where you're just like, oh, hold on, let me macro a little bit. Like, he was attacking and harassing and expanding, and Dark was not getting much for his sake. He wasn't getting a lot of damage done to Special. He wasn't really exploding as a Zerg player. You know, suddenly, boom, 5 bases, 85 drones. He was suppressed, I think, as far as the first, 8 minutes of this game went. But he was able to take one okay fight, because it wasn't a cost-efficient one, but it was enough to push Special back. And then that was enough to, I guess, snowball a little bit. No, snowball's not the right word. It was enough to give Dark the breathing room to really start throwing around units. And when Special tried to almost return the same type of game, throwing around his units, the lack of medevacs, I think, ended up being a real problem. Yeah, interesting game. I do believe Special had an advantage in the first 8 minutes, 10 minutes even, but not able to keep up with the pace that style of Terran sets, has to have. Once things go a little bit wrong on 2 or 3 attacks, suddenly it feels very impossible to recover, and you're getting almost desperate as you throw bodies across the field to try and regain that momentum. Couldn't happen. And Dark also with some excellent Infestor usage. Always got to highlight that. So let's see what happens in Game 3. In the top left of Neo-Humanity, we have Special. In the bottom right, it is Dark. So Special still trying to play as fast as Terran allows. these heavy barracks plays. In the first game, 7 barracks, 1 factory, I believe, right? Really capitalizing on some of the harassment that happened earlier. In the second game, also very barracks heavy, because let's just compare. If you're a little confused as to why that was so different, wasn't the infrastructure setup kind of similar to a lot of other games? Yeah, in terms of the amount of barracks, the amount of factories, oftentimes a Terran player will be on 4 bases, 8 racks, 2 factories. But the style difference, the composition difference would go into the amount of tanks compared to widow mines, and then ghosts would also be included. So tanks being the more slow, literally siege unit, right? They're siege tanks. So you have those 2 options, the later the TVZ goes. And for a while there, it was almost always the multiple tanks, maybe even 3 factories, depending on the game, went ghosts into more of a turtle defensive mode. And then there has been a rise of games like the last one from the Terran players, where it's a lot more about massing up that bio and having consistent attacks and more than one attack as well. Not really doing the good old-fashioned push across the map, siege on siege, siege on siege that we might have seen in like Wings of Liberty, right? Just about action and speed and momentum. And we have seen a rise of that style, I feel like, in the last 6 months. But it is maybe the harder style to play. And when you're talking about the top tier players, everything is going to be more difficult. Every piece of StarCraft is incredibly difficult when you face Dark. But I would say that's the harder style to play, because there's certainly something to be said about being able to almost only pay attention to your side of the map. When you do that turtle style, when you have 5 bases, 2 planetaries, 1 holding a choke, 8 tanks spread around with a couple of widow mines to trip up the Zerg player, missile turrets and center towers and Sim City to trip up the Lings and the Ultras, and then the Ghosts just awaiting the push to go for all those snipes. That you kind of just only look at your base for the most part. But with the mass bio, heavy momentum, fast style of play, the ideal situation is that you're only looking at your opponent's side of the map. So it's actually a flip too, which is interesting. If we think about the mass, the late game defensive Terran, you would see the Terran mostly looking at their base. When you talk about the mass bio momentum based Terran, they want to be always looking at the Zerg space and never looking back home to deal with Ling run buys or set up production, right? Because that would also be something that trips up a lot of worse players when they play that particular style, is that the actual macro behind the scenes is even more difficult, because you're not just, waiting passively with tanks sieged up, waiting for the Zerg player to decide when to take the fights. You're literally just leaving bio units while you go back and build command centers and build up barracks and whatnot. So it is a really difficult style of play to pull off. It also is a style of play, I think, that doesn't really work if from the early point you don't have things going your way. If Dark were to do like a roach push or something into like a roach heavy style, I guess, that could threaten a 1-1 roach push, then that mass bio also might not work very well. But it is fascinating to see the developments, more and more TVZs with that style, because it's a very fun style, no doubt about that. And then how exactly the Terran players use it. In the first game, it looked almost too powerful. It was so clean from special. In the second game, you could really see how special would get tripped up. Now this is interesting too. We actually have a classic opener. The forward wall, once again, is still a bit unusual, but I meant classic opener with these 3 Reapers, many Hellions, because this is what we used to see a lot on a map called Overgrowth. Back in Wings of Liberty, Heart of the Swarm, I think, both of them. Heavy pressure on the shared reinforcement point of the Zerg player. A couple of drones have gone down, a couple of queens heavily injured, but Dark is holding. Also an Overlord, I guess, died, perhaps scouting. maybe. Dark is going into a Roach Warren, so I just brought up Roaches just kind of as an example, but he is actually going into Roaches this game. And the mere idea of Roaches, as slow Lings try to hold off these Hellions, Liberator in the main was already giving Dark trouble, now the Hellions are going to give him a lot of trouble, and that Queen was injured, now goes down to the Hellion fire. A little less to help out. Liberator and Hellions combining together to get maximum damage as the Liberator now protects its little factory and barracks buddies. And the Liberator really is a sore point here. You focus fire that, you take care of the Reaper Hellion. What do? You focus fire the Liberator, and the Reaper Hellion is not quite strong enough to tank down full health Queens. But that was still complicated, wasn't it? I mean, even the grenades from the Reapers added some complication there with dealing with the Liberator, so that was really quite cool. But at the end of the day, Special is still coming out lower in supply. This was a proxy starport, by the way. I didn't mention that, but that's why the Liberators have been here so consistently. And yeah, at the end of the day, I don't know if he actually did enough damage. He does have a third CC back at home. He's setting up his production, but the Roaches have been made, and they've walked across the map. I was actually trying to look for the Roach Warren. There it is. I think Special was able to see that earlier on, so he knew this was a possibility. But if he did it, then the slow Speedlings certainly would have been the tip-off. Liberator comes home to help defend. It really is a small number of Roaches, and they're slow Roaches, and there's not Speedlings following this up because there literally are no Speedlings. So this is relatively easy to handle. Special going to make a mistake here and not repair this reactor. It really is a golden opportunity. 2 SCVs would absolutely be enough to repair this. 50-50 down the drain, and a very long... what's the word I'm looking for? Is I have a little something in my throat. I am still a little sick, so apologies. Anyways, it's not just 50-50. It also takes a very long time to build. So, bit of a mistake there, perhaps. But he also might have been fearing that this was more dedicated, and he was maybe waiting for just the sign of more dedication to like lift the supply depots, right? That might explain why he didn't bother sending out the SCVs. But it was a very light Roach attack, and it was a Roach attack. So that's why the supplies are looking more favorable to Dark than I think they actually should. I think this is a little bit of that just kind of like Roach effect. Actually, as things calm down and Special's infrastructure now is up and running, I do believe that the early game is fine enough for Special. He's only down 11 workers, 3rd CC now up and running. Little supply block is a bit painful, but his tank count's also pretty good. Of course, he knows it's Roaches, so this is where you do have to worry about the 1-1 Roach attack. It's actually has not been particularly popular lately. I'm thinking about a lot of Zerg players going into Roaches. I'm actually not sure the last time I saw Dark do the actual 1-1 Roach all-in. He almost always goes into the Infestation Pit in Baneling Nest and goes into a macro game. But there's always that threat. You can't just say, like, well, you're never going to do it because you haven't done it before. That's not the case here. Because even right now, as I'm looking, this might actually be the dedicated Roach attack. No Infestation Pit kind of points to that. That's literally the decider, Infestation Pit or not Infestation Pit. And Special does need to be very wary of the 1-1 attack, so the way you can tell if a Terran is taking it seriously or not is whether they have all their tanks sieged up with SimCity back at home. They can still do these drops, and these drops are even still crucial, right? They might bring back the army. Sniper Ravager, that's nice. Or generally Scout. So if you saw a bunch of like Ling Baneling back at home for some reason, you might be a little less inclined to believe they're going to attack you with pure Roach, right? Or if you literally saw an Infestation Pit, you again might be a little less scared of the attack. But Special is just doing this for the harassment, little pokey poke, maybe keeping some units at home. He knows that the attack will be on its way. Or does he? Perhaps I spoke too soon. Okay. No, I actually like this. I was worried he was going to put his tanks on the front line of this command center, which I think would be a disaster. But this actually makes a lot of sense. So he thinks he can still grab his 4th base, even though the fear of a 1-1 Roach attack is quite high. I don't know what the trend is lately, too, but we've seen more proxy starports into putting the starport at some random location to build from, but that is going to be stopped. But yeah, he knows the 1-1 Roach attack is going to be on the way, but he sieges his tanks in really nice locations, trying to protect this Would-Be Planetary, but it's not up and running yet. The Roaches coming in here actually might have still surprised Special overall, as it looks like he just does not have enough fodder units to protect his tanks. Everything a little too spread out as Dark came in from multiple directions, and Special is going to be overwhelmed His little attack here is not going to do enough to return the damage, as there are so many Roach Ravagers left over that this should be a break into the natural. Yeah, I think Special... I do believe Special was well aware it was going to happen, but he thought he was well protected enough. And if the Roaches had come in from only one angle, and if they were 15 seconds later, so the planetary was done too, I mean, I could definitely see this being a hold, but it is what it is, and Special is in a lot of trouble. Yeah, he can't come back from this. Unfortunately, the planetary did finish. That's actually unfortunate. He probably should have canceled that once things went to shit. Try and save it, but a bit difficult to do. Yeah, there it is. GG. Yeah, I think, I like Special's idea. So his supply is actually kind of okay against a Roach player because they inflate so much. We have a medevac, which seems okay to be dropping with. This would usually be a very common supply setup for dealing with the 1-1 Roach all-in. However, I think the problem was in being too spread out. He also had SimCity where it was not helpful. He walled off to the left when he actually needed to basically wall off here. So his army pushes out to try and capitalize on the initial spread of Dark, because if Dark spreads incorrectly, then 17 Marines can go kill a couple of Ravagers. But that was actually a bit unfortunate. That was almost a bait, because Dark was actually setting up for an attack from 3 different directions. The Marines were probably better off waiting back at home with the tanks to attack with them. Because now they retreat, but as the tanks are already being jumped upon. Even that tank, you know, in range of the Ravagers. Yeah. Ideally, you face the Roach Ravager army in one direction. And the Zerg player, the onus is on them to find some type of surround or concave. But with the setup here, it looks like Special gave him too much of an opportunity. I mean, Dark definitely planned out the concave, so just like the strengths of Dark being shown here. But I think it was a little overconfidence from Special as well. That made it a bit easier for Dark. Because Special also was probably a little greedy, actually getting his 4th base on location. Despite the attempted cleverness with the tank positioning behind the minerals and the rocks that can actually be broken down. Yeah. There's just not enough units protecting the tanks. The tanks are firing in all different directions. And very unfortunate, because I think Special's overall idea was good, but kind of one of those situations where now that this has happened in this exact situation, Special probably doesn't make the mistake again. But it happens in the very important Game 3 match. Ah, well. It is a tough first match for Special. Again, Dark being the best Zerg in Korea, I believe, and one of the best players in the whole wide world. It's a tough first match. Special does still have the losers match to play out to try and continue his chances of moving on to the GSL. But Dark will wait for the winner of, who was it? Gumiho and Creator, which we will be getting into next. In the top left of Gresfon, we now have the blue Terran Gumiho. In the bottom right, we have the red Protoss Creator. So a TVP, we just saw Special lose to Dark 2-1. He won the first game in almost easy fashion. Second game was going his way and then kind of fell to shit. And then the third game was okay for both sides, I would say. And then it was just a 1-1 Roach attack that caught Special's defenses underprepared. They caught them overconfident, actually, because I would say that Special did know that was on the way. That's going to sum up the first series, but now we get a TVP. Let's talk a little about these two players. For Dark versus Special, I think it was very clear who the underdog was. We had Special coming in as, of course, the non-Korean, which, you know, just like, that just means you're not as good. And then we also had Dark's legacy compared to Special's legacy, and Dark just has far more victories, major, prestigious, premier tournaments under his belt. For Creator and Gumiho, I feel like they're actually quite close as far as the history goes, and as far as their highs and lows go as well. I do think that Gumiho is a little favored right now. Again, the matchup being difficult, but instead of just kind of generalizing and saying that over and over again, I can actually tell you for a fact that Creator has expressed frustrations with the matchup. Now, of course, he's going to do his best to overcome those frustrations, and I'm sure he does win PvTs occasionally. But we know that that initial feeling does affect how the rest of their games play out. If they keep on losing to adept rushes, and they once again face someone who's a known adept rusher, they're not going to have a good time. They either still lose to it and just get increasingly more frustrated, or they almost over-defend against it and it doesn't happen, and then there's other problems with that, right? And I thought of adepts just because I know that's one of the more obnoxious things, like ZVP-wise. So I'm a little worried for Creator. I also think that as far as the highs and lows of any particular day, we know that Creator can be a little emotional, which in some ways is very good, you know, especially for the broadcast. It's excellent. But in the actual way of keeping calm and holding on can be a bad thing. But I think the Creator has done a pretty good job of at least being able to maybe not let go. Sometimes he lets go. Sometimes he actually is okay. But I think he's just done a good job of expressing his feelings, frustrations, or happiness, while also keeping his play calm and collected. And that's what's really important, after all. As long as you play calm and collected, fist bump and raise up your hands and cheer or pound the desk or whatever you want to do as much as you want, but the actual play should be very calm. And I think he's been pretty good about that. Gumiho has been pretty much I mean, I've never really felt that he's been tilted or emotional about play. We know that he's a very enjoyable player to watch because he does do a bunch of different builds. He's very eager to try things differently and work things out. But recently, with his performance at Yangshiping, we also know that his mechanics have seemingly been improved upon as well, because that seems to always be what's holding Gumiho back. He'll have amazing builds and amazing ideas, but something will go wrong, generally on the mechanics. He's not as fast as his opponent. Perhaps there's more supply blocks that the casters aren't necessarily pointing out. You know, the small details that you'd have to actually get into the replay and analyze, but something kind of goes wrong that makes Gumiho's really strong ideas not pan out. But then he actually had those strong ideas pan out versus Serral, and one of the most mechanically demanding matchups that we have. So I would say that Gumiho was at the top of his game, even though his Home Story Cup performance was not nearly as good as his Yangshiping. And speaking of that, he would have only have been home, as this was played out yesterday morning, so I don't want to do math. It was played out very recently. Gumiho's only been home back in Korea for about a week. Like 9 days, I think. So that's enough to get over, but depending on how his schedule there after his arrival has been going and whatnot, he might still be a little fatigued from it. Not sure. Can't say for sure. But just things to point out affecting this particular matchup today. So far, we have had a very normal TVP. Creator goes into Blink with 3 gateways, so not a full 4 gate, but also not a third base 2 gate. And Gumiho has gone for a typical Widowmine drop, which was completely taken down. Yowza, that was actually the Medivac and 4 Widowmines all taken care of. That is not a good feeling for the Terran player. I imagine it got at least a couple of probes, is indeed. The Adepts also did die, so there's been some trading going on, but to build up 4 Widowmines and then have it all die, it's actually kind of painful, man. Because the 2 Widowmines extra, it's not really the expense there that I'm concerned about. It's the amount of time it was taking up on the factory that I'd be concerned about. So the second tank is much, much later, or the transition back into Widowmines is also later, so on and so forth. And speaking of the factory, we probably would want Widowmine? Well, hold on. So I see this Templar Archives on the way, and immediately I was thinking charge that Archon. However, we don't actually have charge on the way. So I was thinking Widowmine take care of the charge lots, but so far still no charge. Does Creator want to get charge? Hello? I feel like he does. I feel like that's the next step. That's the next step in any Protoss follow-up from a Twilight Council and Blink. I'm worried. I have concerns. Oh, thank God he gets charged. Unfortunately, it's a fairly quick upgrade, so I think he'll be okay. But yeah, that was a little concerning. But 80 gas late to that. I understand prioritizing the Templar Archives and the Storm. I think I can understand why that would happen, but... And it's particularly important because we are expecting an eventual Terran move out. Although Gumiho was playing awfully defensive, so Gumiho didn't actually know exactly what was going on. It's possible that he was a little wary of an actual 4-gate. He saw 3 gates in total, but what if there was one somewhere else that he kind of missed or something? And 3 gates do allow the Protoss the attempt at aggression. 3 Stalker Warpins versus 4 is a little bit less, but it's still enough to kind of scare a Terran player who's a little underdeveloped. 2 Ravens? Now that's interesting. I think Gumiho is hoping to just straight up counter a Colossus opener, because we did see 2 Ravens experimented with across the last 7 months or whatever it is since the patch. They're very effective against someone trying to go into Colossus. I mean, the Colossus basically never get to engage. However, this is not a Colossus game. This has gone into a very fast Storm game, something that Creator, I believe, has yet to reveal. As I said, the charge was fortunately a fast upgrade, so it's actually going to finish. But there's the Storm. Actually not the best one. If Gumiho really was not expecting Storm, I think there was a better opportunity to catch his group, his army clumped up. But the charge lots are here, and I don't see any Widow Mines. The Interference Matrix gets on top of that Warp Prism, takes away 2 of the High Templars from the equation, but I think the rest of the Protoss army might be good enough. Immortal also gets matrixed. Stalkers trying to take down every last tank, just shy of killing that last one, but I think it's good enough. Storms are once again available, and that last tank is a goner. It was a little weirder than I think Creator was hoping for, though, right? Again, that first Storm wasn't absolutely the best. He did get his Warp Prism Interference Matrix. His Stalkers did not kill all the tanks particularly quickly, so all 3 of them got more shots than I think he would have wanted. Like, that was a bit scrappier than I think Creator was hoping for. And for Gumiho, he should actually be kind of relieved to be able to escape with the army that he did. His medevac's intact, decent amount of bio. It took a long time as well, so he was able to reinforce across that time, and his 2 Ravens survived. So, yeah, I'm actually thinking that was not the chance that Creator was looking for, because here's the other thing. Like, the Creator has gone into Charge Lot Templars, which is great as long as there's not EMPs. And then once there's EMPs, it does drop off fairly hard. You want to have at least a sizable army to accommodate, or you want to be moving over to Colossus. He also doesn't have any upgrades. So Creator was actually quite dedicated in a way. I think his idea was that he was going to dominate the first push and then immediately counterattack. However, his counterattack, as you can see here, is hardly a counter. It actually took some time to build up. It arrives, and it's actually a brick wall of bio and repaired Ravens. Yeah, I actually think this is a really bad game for Creator now. Which is really too bad, because I feel like the idea was fantastic, and the idea was even better because Gumiho went for this dedicated 2 Raven thing. He also dedicated the tanks for a while longer, 3 tanks, not just 2 or 1, which charge lots are usually good against. But again, that fight just was a little bit worse. It took way too long, and I think Gumiho should be feeling good about this game, especially once he has his Ghost actually out and about. Gumiho is up in supply, army supply specifically. Again, those upgrades also being a real problem. 1-1 versus 0-0, so those charge lots are really not that effective. We do have Warp Prisms still flying around, although that one did just die. Zealots are going to cause some problems, as the right side is also going to be attacked, but it looks like Gumiho was kind of expecting that. Or just coincidentally moved his army there. Either way. 8 SCVs go down, 9 SCVs go down, a Ghost falls. I mean, hey, that's not terrible damage, but that was, let's say, I think 7 Zealots and a Warp Prism, so not really a great trade. The best thing about that was that it bought time. And Creator might be able to move on to Colossus effectively now. However, I would still say his lack of upgrades are very concerning. His 4th base also came down during that time, during that defense process, so that is up and running. And I think as long as he plays smart defensively, Creator absolutely has a chance to settle this game. Make it once again very even. These run-bys and the time they have taken to clean up are super, super important. If they had not happened, if that Warp Prism died before it dropped out Zealots, I think Gumiho is commencing the attack with only 1 Colossus on the field. And while the 3 Zealots on the right side might have still done some damage, I really wonder how that attack would have gone if Creator only had one Colossus to defend. We'll never know. The game continues on, both of them on 4 bases as Gumiho tries to settle his 4th. Stalkers are actually there. Not enough to kill it, I believe, but the army is now awkwardly out of position. Now we're good. Creator, knowing that he's far too close to the reinforcement point and he doesn't know where the army is, he just skedaddles, recalls out of there. And this is reaching the almost maxed out point of a TVP, so I don't think the absence of a recall is now going to hurt Creator significantly. Be a little more sus if this was a, you know, he was just getting to his 4th base and Gumiho was really applying the pressure. I think Gumiho, perhaps identifying the time of which he could just go across the map and have an almost counter army, is gone. EMPs versus Charged Archons, right? He does have to worry about the defensive prowess of Protoss as well as the 4 Colossus, so he had to build up his Vikings, which still aren't at a very high number. And while his upgrades are fantastic, you still don't want to just push Bio through a choke up against this much AoE. So waiting instead for a maxed out army is probably the good idea. I kind of wish that Gumiho had not swapped over to Liberators. I feel like if he had focused entirely on maxing out with Bio Ghost Viking, he would have maxed out by now, and he'd be able to pressure the front. He still has 2 Ravens too, so 2 Interference Matrix. Oh, sorry, 1. 1 did die. But still, 1 full energy Raven. Hopefully not feedbacked. That would also contribute a lot. But Gumiho is also adding on his upgrades for... Oh, that was the Ghost Cloaking. Confused me for a second. He is adding on his upgrades for Liberators. So +1 ship weapons, as well as the Fusion Core. Extra command centers. You know, it wasn't really about diving towards maxed out army as fast as possible. He's still not maxed out, in fact. For Creator, that is kind of the Protoss conundrum. You don't necessarily want to be maxed out in case you have to warp in because they are attacking you from multiple locations. So I believe that's excuses Creator's non-max out. However, I don't think he actually warped in to defend it, so I think he just defended. He just split up his army. Still something to consider. And now, as he adds on his Fleet Beacon and Stargates, the supply gap might be because of the desire to move over into carriers. This is kind of an odder game as far as the tempo of it, the pacing. Because usually what happens is that the Protoss, after their initial defense of the Bio army, they get maxed out or close to maxed out with Colossus, Zealot, High Templar, Stalker, you know, the whole grab bag of Protoss units. They usually then consolidate their army down to just almost pure Stalker Disruptor. The Colossus die, and they're like, whatever. Disruptors are better anyways. And then they get really aggressive. They get the map control. They're the ones that are beep-bopping around the Terran's base, and the Terran has to try and catch up. Creator skipped that entirely. Gumiho also kind of skipped, if you will. He chose not to go for a more aggressive Bio approach. Again, going into a later TVP setup a bit earlier than expected. So they both kind of, you know, like skipped, chose not to go for a certain type of PvT, and are now both headed into a real Supreme late game TVP, which you do not get very often. Usually the transition of the Protoss into Tempest and Carriers is far too slow and expensive, and instead they do just rely on the Disruptor Blinkstalker army with DTs blinking around killing bases. So it's a bit of a treat for the first game here. We do get a macro game, Creator just didn't flop over and die, and then we do get something that actually involves Stargate units, which again I think is so rare outside of, you know, an Oracle or two. 10 probes went down to the drop, by the way, but I was mostly looking at the forges and they remain untouched, so the upgrades will continue on. Gumiho only had 1 engineering bay. He still only has 1 engineering bay. Wow, okay. So he has actually fallen behind in those upgrades. 3-1 versus 2-2, with 3-3 probably getting chronoed out. Gumiho, that's an interesting decision. Well, anyways. Now he's going into 3 starports, as I believe he saw the number of Stargates, he saw what they were making as well, and he knows exactly the type of game he's getting into. We also saw that nuke that was very easily responded to, but certainly nukes potentially a problem later on, especially as we reach towards 6th and 7th bases on the big map that is Gresfon. Creator does have all of the upgrades, I suppose, you would want for a late game Protoss. DT Blink is primarily what I'm thinking of, but he's also getting into Warp Prism speed and his carrier upgrades, and of course that 3-3. Wait. No, that Dark Trend's only just beginning. I don't know. Wait, what? Oh, it was snipes. That's what happened in the drop. Okay. So the drop did do something, but oh! What? Hit it! That Nexus is a goner. Creator could do nothing about that. It was too late to try and snipe the Ghost, and the Bio Army was protecting me anyways, so the Nexus does get taken down at the last seconds. 10 probes as well, and a handful of army units got very injured. This is a very odd-looking army, very susceptible to EMPs. Oh my god. Because even the Disruptors, in a way, are susceptible, right? You get them at half health, and then they're much more snipeable. Interesting game, interesting stuff. Back in the main base for a couple of drops. Perhaps this one will once again go after the Dark Shrine. Pylon and Forge this time. I did think the Forge was a worthwhile snipe, but he didn't go for it the first time around. Now he does. So 3-3 completely denied. However, the Dark Shrine will at least remain intact. And hey, we are talking about moving over into carriers, so perhaps the 3-3 being later isn't the worst thing. I mean, Gumiho's still not maxed out on his upgrades either. He only finished up that +2 armor. He's also going into battlecruisers, which I should have expected. I should have called that one. That's my bad. I saw a bunch of starports, and I was thinking typical TVP. That's my issue. All right, I was like, Vikings. No, of course not. First of all, battlecruisers actually are the end game for Terrans, so I've always said that. But oftentimes, again, the way that these matchups pan out is that there's just not a lot of time for these players to do the ultimate best thing, right? There's not a lot of time for the Protoss to get to a mass carrier army. There's not a lot of time for the Terran to get to a mass battlecruiser army, so it's more about the Blinkstalker Disruptor, or if it does get to carriers, it's more about maxing out on Vikings. Now, this is Gumiho, and if someone is going to actually push the envelope, it's going to be Gumiho. He's going to dive towards those battlecruisers, even when some other Terrans would be going into Vikings. And I think also it's a Gumiho thing. I do believe that totally and truly. It is also, if you really thought about how this game is going, it also does make a lot of sense. For the most part, this has been a kind of a passive TDP. Gumiho has had plenty of time to set up his defenses, his upgrades. No, he only had one Jambi, that's right. So his buildings actually are not very upgraded, but he does have planetaries and SimCity and Liberators and barracks covering bases and so on and so forth. So he figures that he's pretty locked up and that the carriers will not be an issue immediately, although they're about to raise to the number of 11. And there's only 3 battlecruisers, so I am a little concerned about this. But Gumiho is saying that I can defend long enough to get to a decent number of battlecruisers. And if it gets a little scary, perhaps the battlecruisers can go for a run-by and buy some time. They can't teleport in, they'll just be dead if they do, but they could go for a run-by. But it looks like, you know, again, combination of Gumiho being Gumiho and the game being what it is, Gumiho is going to be allowed to get to a lot of battlecruisers. Creator has gotten to an extraordinary number of carriers, actually, like with very little interruption. His upgrades got interrupted, not his carrier production. 11 carriers. He probably could have tried doing something with 7 or 8 carriers, and he did not. He stayed at home. Scan barely shit. That's not how that works. Yeah, barely seeing the carriers. Not the full number of them, but he already knew the carriers were around. So, I mean, did Creator miss an opportunity here then? Because I gotta say, I am pretty biased as someone who always loses against battlecruisers and yet never wins with them. How does that work? I do think late game battlecruiser is the ultimate composition in the hands of a master of them as well. Gumiho has actually disappointed me in the past. I remember thinking the same thing of a previous, perhaps GSL game with Gumiho. Maybe it was some other type of game, I'm not sure. But I remember Gumiho going into mass battlecruisers versus Protoss, and I said, oh, well, he should be very good with them and they should work. And then he really did not play well with them. Honest to God, like, he did not play well. Excellent use of the Disruptor right there to take care of the nuke. Like, he bled out battlecruisers throughout the game, which you're not supposed to do. And then his decision-making with the battlecruisers was also in question. It was very odd, because I consider Gumiho to be one of the most reliable battlecruiser players. And thank you for that raid up a tree. So, I mean, that might have been a fluke. That might have just been a one-off. In general, I still think that Gumiho should have the better battlecruiser usage. And if he does... Oh, God, look at the battlecruiser's not dying. Wait, what? See, no, it happens again, right? Like, he is very late to microing his battlecruisers. As far as I can see, there wasn't that big of a disruption or distraction. I can't explain that. I kind of chuckled because the battlecruiser really wasn't dying all that quickly. But it still died because he just wasn't paying attention. It was very odd. So this is the type of thing that you're just not supposed to do if you're very good with battlecruisers, because I think all of us can look at that and all of us can agree that most pros would have saved it. Right? But whatever. You know, one battlecruiser loss is not the end of the game, but it's just, if it's a sign of things to come, then that is very disturbing. Big bio drop in the main base is going to go for the 7X cores, which is exactly what you want to go for. Nuke is also covering the snipes, which I love. And while we're at it, you know, the sacrifice of some of these units is going to allow Gumiho to make even more battlecruisers. So really multiple reasons to go for the drops there, but excellent drop. Perhaps he knew the 7X cores were there and noted that earlier. If so, nicely done. This army is a goner. It could have left, instead it stayed, and the carriers run after it. It takes down what it can before it dies, which was a decent amount. And again, the sacrifice is probably okay because Gumiho does want to get into more battlecruisers. Finally getting some of those building upgrades as well, which are just comically late, I feel like, for a TVP, because he stayed literally on one engineering bay this entire time. Still, one engineering bay. Gumiho does what Gumiho wants to do, alright? But yeah, these carriers are only at 1-1. The battlecruisers are at 3-2. He's been upgraded the ship weapons for a long time now. Initially, I thought for Liberators, but while they did help the Liberators, I think the ultimate goal is battlecruisers. So that plus the general battlecruiser carrier dynamic, I feel like Gumiho has a very good chance of winning this battle. Carriers are doing ditto damage. They both are base trading in the perfect use of the word. Base for base, base for base. The carriers, I think, kill things faster, maybe? I don't know. Well, building armor might be done now. Building armor is done, so maybe not. And again, they only have that +1 on the interceptors. However, there are not enough SCVs to repair against 11 carriers shooting out the interceptors, even if they only have +1. The battlecruisers have split up, I believe. There are still 14 of them. I'm not sure where the other ones are, but these ones are prepared to teleport back home. And this is a really good maneuver, right? So what you don't want to do with battlecruisers is have a moment where this is all 14 of them and they teleport back home, and then Creator goes, your teleport's on cooldown, I'm going to go counterattack. If you have 5 battlecruisers on teleport cooldown, that still leaves a lot to micro. So I really like that he split up the army, and obviously making sure that if he did miss-micro the battlecruisers, it wouldn't be his entire army dead because of it. Again, they traded out almost exactly the same number of bases. They all lost their extra bases, and now they're back to some of their originals, although this one is kind of fresh. Gumiho was not mining from this one for a very long time. I know we saw a nuke. It was in the main base, killed maybe a couple of pylons, lots of depowered structures for Creator. Creator, unfortunately, I do believe is going to fall to the battlecruiser play. I am very empathetic with this one. I feel like I'm playing this game right here, right now. Creator supply blocked. I don't believe he has enough minerals to unsupply block himself. 7 pylons might do it, actually. But the point is, he's in trouble. He's going to go for an attack. 11 carriers, 4 Tempest, still only on that 1-1. +2 is almost at 8 seconds to go, but the battlecruisers teleport on top of the army. They're looking for the fight. No retreat for Creator's air army, and the Tempests are going to get slaughtered. The carriers only now outputting all of the interceptors. It's a total disaster, and Gumiho will win game number 1 convincingly at the end. Kind of a perfect situation for a battlecruiser player, really. GG's. Game number 2, in the top left, up 1, he is Gumiho. In the bottom right, we do have Creator. I was wondering if Creator had missed the timing of the carrier transition. It felt like he might have been able to catch Gumiho in that very awkward spot that battlecruiser would-be battlecruisers Battlecruiser players find themselves in, which is the spots of which they still have a lot of non-battlecruiser supply, and they're trying to get to battlecruisers, and then the carriers arrive. And maybe if the non-battlecruiser supply is in a lot of Vikings, it'd be okay. But that game, that was not the case. Gumiho did not go for the safe, kind of, you know, temporary measure against the carriers. He did not add on 16 Vikings and then say, let me go into battlecruisers. He went from being almost pure bio with 4 Vikings, I believe, to getting to battlecruisers. And I believe I checked the unit supply at a time which Creator had 6 to 8 carriers, and Gumiho still only had those 4 Vikings, 3 battlecruisers in production, and nothing but bio as well. I really think that would have been a good time for Creator to attack, because there's still a couple of complicating factors, such as the EMPs and the ground army, you know, Marines on the ground with +3 attack do take down interceptors rather quickly. So it's not like it's the biggest wide open shot you could ever take. But I do feel like Creator missed an opportunity to really start to pressure. He was very passive in that game as a whole, which made a lot of sense for the way that the opener turned out. Again, I think he was in trouble, but he played up the defensive for base Colossus A-okay. He moved right over into Stargates, which I think is an okay thing to do, as opposed to going into the Blinkstalk or Disruptor phase, if you take advantage of it. And it just felt like Creator never took advantage of it, despite kind of skipping a part of PvT faster than his opponent kind of skipped a part of TVP. Creator didn't actually do anything with it. Again, the lack of Vikings, meaning that at the very least he could probably harass and retreat if necessary. He wouldn't be chased down. The lack of building armor and high auto tracking for the missile turrets and planetary fortress and whatnot also meant that he would probably kill those buildings relatively quickly. He just played around with his carriers on his side of the map for a very long time, taking little pokes of damage with some bio attacks that were never very promising and a couple of nukes that were a bit cheeky, but I don't think were really the biggest issue. I absolutely believe that Creator missed an opportunity. Perhaps was thinking, I have all the time in the world, when in fact he did not. He did have a lot of time, though. He did. Gumiho was not maxing out on battlecruisers particularly quickly. 3's not a big deal. 6 is getting there, but if you already have 11 carriers, that's still not that bad. 9 battlecruisers, you really missed your opportunity, and then 12 to 14, well, you probably just screwed up and you lost. It takes a very long time for the Terran to get there. So that's supposed to be the point in which the Terran takes a bunch of damage. So sometimes we see those games and the Terran player does get to 14 battlecruisers, but in the process they've lost all of their mining buildings, most of their bio, like it's only the battlecruisers, and they're pretty much on a one army game. You know, the army either wins or it doesn't. But even that didn't happen. By the time we had those base trades, it was a base trade for both of them. They both lost out on bases, and Gumiho had already gotten to the supreme battlecruiser count. Yeah. I mean, Creator's a kind of a tragic figure. We know that he's very passionate about this game, so we feel stronger for when he loses than some other players. So I always, especially when it seems like it's a missed opportunity, I'm always a little sad for Creator, even though I really do like Gumiho. Gumiho is going for a bit of an unorthodox opener in TVP, going for 2 Cyclone Marine drop. Creator thought it might be handleable. Is that a word? It is now. But it was not. The second Cyclone coming in has really ruined Creator's plans of dealing with this. Creator on 2 bases, 3 gateways once again, does have a decent amount of production to handle some earlier attacks. But his misread on the situation is starting to allow a bit of a snowball for Gumiho. Medevac's still alive. Second Cyclone's still alive. Gateway was taken down, which I guess is preferable to the 7X core. If he was only warping in slow zealots, like, ugh, that would not be pretty. Perhaps Gumiho also missing a bit of an opportunity. Could have been harassing the 7X core instead. Yeah, he definitely could have. Gumiho also going to be following this up with tank production and Banshee production, so Creator is not only having a tough time actually handling this, but in the difficulty of handling this, he is also missing opportunities to get on Gumiho's side of the map and scouts and figure out what the hell is the follow-up. So that's the real problem of this game, perhaps. It looks like he did get into the main base with something. Hallucination, perhaps, and did see that it was a tech lab on the starport, but considering that last game Gumiho went for a double Raven opener, that doesn't guarantee he knows Banshees are on the way. Finally cleans this up. Eventually the production did kick in and blink as well, and Gumiho did overstay. Get a little caught up in his own victories, perhaps. Could have escaped, at least with the Marines, perhaps. And a Cyclone. I mean, he really could have escaped with everything, actually. And having everything escape, maybe the Marines are getting torn down as the Blink Stalkers chase, but having the medevac escape with, let's say, 6 Marines and 1 Cyclone alive would be a big help for the defense here, as the Stalkers do look for some revenge. The tanks on the high grounds out of position, so some SCs are going to go down. Lost mounting time as well. Creator probably pretty happy with his counterattack damage so far, but he is also getting Banshee harassed back at home. It looks like he was wary of the potential of Banshees. Even though Gumiho only went for Ravens in the last game, Gumiho is a more likely Terran than most to go into Banshees, and it seems like Creator was mindful of that, so he has shield batteries in every single mineral base, which means that one Banshee was not effective. Gumiho probably looking for the quick timing with Banshees and trying to bring the counterattack Stalkers back at home, was eager to use the first Banshee all by her lonesome. And that was, well, very ineffective, as we could see. If he didn't perhaps feel the need to do that and he waited for 2 Banshees, that might have still been a very good Banshee opener. His Creator would still have been out of position. And even if he responds as quickly as possible, he could still easily grab 5 or 6 probes before the recall happened. But, say Livy, right? Gumiho has to live with how things have turned out. Initially looking so promising for him with the slight snowball in the first 4 or 5 minutes, but kind of turning sour on him. Now I feel like Creator is pretty comfortable. And I think one of the reasons that also was better for Creator than it might have looked for a second there when his Stalkers were dying, right, is that he did fit in his third base before all that stuff happened. If he got distracted and overwhelmed without his third base, he's definitely behind. But his third base was up and running, it was building probes, and he eventually did push back and even get a counterattack in. Completely nullified the Banshee follow-up as well, at least so far. And now if the Banshees do damage, it's a little less effective, because later on in the game. So I think Creator's in a pretty fine spot. The Sim and Combat Shields are finishing up now. The first big Terran push is on its way. 3 tanks included, just like last game. Banshees on the backside as well. Excellent maneuvering here from Gumiho, realizing the opportunity was there. Recall has to be used, but the Banshees adding in that damage with their DPS contributed to a couple of those extra Stalker losses. Does Creator have enough back at home? Maybe not, but this is where the War Prism comes in. A good number of Zealots as well. That is a lot of Zealots to dedicate on the run by. However, I think it's a very appropriately timed big attack. If this was when the Bio Army had yet to move out, obviously the Zealots die. If it was when the army of Gumiho was already on Creator's side of the map, we would have probably a very awkward base trade. But the right timing here, the Goldilocks timing, now is going to turn into a big attack from Creator as he just warps in Zealots non-stop. No upgrades here, just pure charge lot fuel. He's not even mining all of his 4 gases. Never got to a 5th and a 6th, so he sees the opportunity and he's going to take it. Gumiho in trouble. Once again, without those Wood of Mines, something I pointed out last game, is having more difficulty against the Zealots. The tanks do find a beautiful position on the high ground, however, so even though they're not the most effective, they will definitely still be adding in that damage, and it looks like Gumiho might be able to consolidate his army well enough to defend. However, he needs to actually move his army, and most importantly, his medevacs over to the right side. I don't think he has enough medevacs in general, actually. That is a big problem right now. So much time spent on building overall 3 Banshees in this game has perhaps ruined his chances to hold against the mass charge lot attack. So much of the army injured and now going to have to sim once again. Immortal getting some important shots off against the Marauders, and the Zealots not only actually connecting to the weakened army, but also providing all of that soak so the Stalkers can be the DPSers. Third CC is also going to go down, and I think if third CC did not go down, actually the Gumiho has officially held. Even though he's down to 38 SCVs, with 3 CC, he gets back up to, let's say, 55 fairly quickly, and is probably comfortable at that point. Because Creator is, again, upgradeless and relatively techless. I hardly count Blink and Charge to be very high technology. That said, Gumiho might still have an opportunity to 2-base all in. I think he absolutely should. I think it's actually a time to just unsiege and move across the map. You know your opponent has no upgrades and is still charge out stalker based. If you give them time to get into even Archons, you know, maybe they can't get the Storm, but if they can get to Archons, that would be very helpful against the 2-base SCV pool. Creator actually continuing to be aggressive. As long as he actually lives, I think that's fine. Just needs to make sure not to over-dedicate. But yeah, I'd say pull the SCVs. Pull the boys! Pull the boys! Pull them! I mean, what's the reason not to, honestly, right? Except that perhaps Gumiho didn't think about it. There we go. The SCV pool now happening. Unfortunately, the SCVs get caught by the Stalkers. Now, the Stalkers will not be back in position to hold against this, to be fair, but that's almost all of the Zealots. Sorry, it's almost all of the SCVs being torn down. Well, that was an exaggeration. There's still a lot of SCVs. That's a lot of SCVs being torn down that is supposed to be buffering for the Bio Army. And they are supposed to be on the front lines. Now getting to those front lines. Creator is coming in with almost a surround at this point, but 2 Immortals very vulnerable, get taken down instantly. SCVs go back to the front lines, which is now behind the Terran army. And the shield battery, I believe, is still kind of affecting the game. It's not affecting the actual humongous army behind the bio. The SCVs are not A-moving. They're on hold position, thinking that would be more effective. Perhaps it was, but was it enough? The tank also being transported to the high ground and sieged up is an excellent decision that Gumiho made on the fly. And that force field almost started to hurt Creator more than helped. I don't know if it initially helped or not, but definitely didn't help at the end right there. His Sim City finally getting destroyed means that Creator can go for more of a concave or surround on the army, but he instead decides to try and interrupt the reinforcements. Perhaps the better idea. He takes away the reinforcements. This army is starting to look smaller and smaller, more injured as well. The medevacs are out of energy. They are no longer supporting this army. The Creator, with enough production still up and running in the main base, I think has got this on lockdown. His army's coming back from dealing with reinforcements. Gumiho knows it's coming back, and he has got to get out of there. But are the reinforcements enough? If Gumiho had a second SCV pull, he might. If he had 20 more SCVs to get to the cause, he might actually win this. But down to 2. There is no second SCV pull. We do not count that. And without the buffer, all Creator needs to do is buy some time, warp in a couple more Archons, 7 more Zealots, and I think he's got this. Especially if he can do it aside a shield battery, which he definitely can. Gumiho doesn't have any other options. Surround comes in, and Creator will be able to hold against the SCV pool of Gumiho. It was Gumiho's best chance in the game. Perhaps it could have been done a little bit faster, arguably, but Creator just had a lot of infrastructure, a lot of production, and probably the foresight to know, okay, I'm about to be SCV pulled. So he slapped down the Templar Archives for a couple of crucial Archons to help out, too. Very fun game. And now let's see who actually wins the best of 3 in the next game. The series all tied up. We get into Babylon. In the top left, it is Gumiho. The bottom right, it is Creator. Gumiho, as far as I know, still teamless, by the way. Seems like a missed opportunity for some teams out there. Anywho, very fun last game. Creator holding the counter-attack. I'd say it's a very complicated game to summarize, though, because it really wasn't the case in which Creator should have been as ahead as he was. Gumiho not having enough SCVs to repair his command center or not completely retreating his command center, take your pick, was a real problem. A genuine mistake, right? He definitely could have pulled the command center back entirely to save it. And as I said at that time, if his 3 CCs were up, even though he was down, I think, like 17, 20 SCVs, 3 CCs, 5 rounds of SCV production, you're back up to like 55 SCVs, and your opponent is still only on charge blink, not even storm, and no upgrades. I mean, that game plays out. I think that game plays out for a very long time. but third CC going down put Gumiho in the all-in position. And the all-in position, SCV pool was still kind of feisty. But it did take a very long time to get going. So this time around, we have a unique opener SimCity-wise for Creator. Forward wall off, almost like it's a PvZ. Usually this does lend itself to some slightly faster aggression, but... Oh, I shouldn't say usually. It can lend to faster aggression, but as we have no Zealot on the way, it is just going to make that wall. So it's easier to block scouting or defend Hellion openers. The downside to this, because there is a downside, there's a reason that Protoss don't always do this, is that you don't have a Reaper wall. So the Reaper can get in for scouting, so... Okay, you block the second scout, I should say. You block the second scout, because assuming you have 3 units at that time, you can block the Reaper here and the Reaper Hellion over here. But then you also are a little bit more vulnerable to a tank push in the early game, because your buildings, the very few that you have, are on the front lines. But I would say the last time I saw this be punished because of a tank push early on is, I think 2 years ago? It's been a while. Bunker's not quite done, and that probe actually helped out. It got a little taser on the Marine. I believe that let the Adept two-shot it, so very nicely done, probe. Gave its life to the cause. It's a robot, so I guess you're not supposed to care about it. I care about the probe. Oh, that's not gonna finish. I saw that. I saw that coming. I'm surprised that Gumiho didn't actually remove the SCV and try to save it. Now it'll finish. Even with 2 Adepts, we have a 2-shot now. Oh, cheeky on the save. Dodged. The Adept attack. Hellion does pop out, so it was going to be Reaper Hellion. Now it's going to be used defensively. Eventually we'll go across the map and try and get some scouting as well. Ideally, it would love to chase down some of the Adepts if they got weak enough, and I believe maybe one of the Adepts could have died. But right now, Gumiho's problem is that he never got any scouting whatsoever, so he has no idea what Creator's up to. Could be a proxy gateway for all he knows, although... unlikely, that would have already appeared. But more importantly, it could be a Phoenix or an Oracle follow-up for all he knows, and it actually is a Phoenix follow-up, right? So trying to immediately go across the map is only going to find so much success. At the very least, it will actually scout that it is Phoenix as it dies, but still. There's that wall in effect right now. The Phoenix are going to take their sweet time, staying at home. I believe with the Hellion being revealed, Creator knows at least one thing about his opponent, and that thing is that it's not a 3-racks opener. So if there is a little more suspicion on the possibility of a 3-racks, Creator might have sent the Phoenix out just to literally scout, but now he's pretty sure it's a 1-1-1. It is. And so he saved the Phoenix for as long as possible, only now getting them scouted with the Reaper hop up in the main base, which is wide open. I mean, this Reaper could have done that a while ago. It just took its sweet time. And now Gumiho is a little more in an awkward position than he would like. He was already dedicated to a tank. Maybe he gets a Cyclone now. He already dedicated to the Raven. Maybe he gets a Viking now, but it's just not the ideal setup, and the Raven really does have to be quite careful about where it moves. The Phoenix will be hunting for that one. Not very uncommon for especially Korean Terrans to still get a Raven, even if they knew it was a Stargate opener, though. I'm guessing that gas is supposed to be filled. I believe the Phoenix Colossus transition will soon be underway. Well, he is having more of a mineral problem, so maybe not. Maybe he's actually doing it perfectly. I just hope he remembers to fill it. Okay, good. Alright, so that seemed like it was on purpose. Stim on the way alongside +1 combat shields. There it is. Also starts up. Medevac soon as well. He did not actually get a Cyclone or any amount of Vikings, so basically no anti-Phoenix defense, which maybe the Phoenix had a little bit more time to try and kill some SCVs. Gumiho did invest into at least 1 missile turret, however, and his Marine counts is already high enough to ward away those Phoenix. And Gumiho should be expecting Phoenix Colossus too. Although we have seen some Protoss players play a little bit of trickery on their opponents, going into Phoenix, showing a Robo, but then actually adding on a Twilight Council and Templar Archives, which kind of resets the technology branch. It's a bit of an investment. Oh no! That is not on purpose. least he didn't die. Clearly rallied with the Observer. The Phoenix now charged with making sure that Immortal survives as it crab walks back home. It is injured but alive. And it will regain its shield at the very least. The Phoenix so far have done very little, by the way. You know, it was cool that they got to be a surprise, kind of, but they didn't really do a whole lot. And now they're not grabbing the Raven either, although they might get this medevac. Gumiho trying to counter Micro. So far, so good. But, you know, you definitely don't want to lose the Raven. You also don't want to lose the medevac. And trying to save both of them as the Phoenix roam around is proving a little difficult. But the slow march continues. Wouldn't mind siege hopping instead of tanks. Trying to ward away those Phoenix. Creator actually setting up for a bit of an attack. One that I don't think he was really willing to dedicate to, but he was hoping to bait out some of the Raven energy at the very least. You do have to do this in Protoss' position. Third CC on location. Seems like it'll be effective. Looks like Gumiho is not necessarily expecting to be attacked. Or no, he actually is totally fine. I was saying it because his tank wasn't sieged, but it would have been lifted regardless, so maybe he just doesn't care. He's just gonna go after it. He's gonna try and gun down this Colossus. It is effective, but the other Colossus is still alive, and the anti-armor missile might make the army more vulnerable. It does not take away the damage output of the army, which still seems to be good enough as Creator does manage to push this back. The loss of his second Colossus is a bummer. But if he could go ahead and give a little bit more chase to this army, kill some of those weakened Marines, kill the tank, there it goes, then Gumiho is actually the one that's in trouble. Gumiho might even be overstaying, to be honest. More Marines on death's door. Every last Marine might count if Creator really is planning a counterattack. If he's got a Proxy Gateway or War Prism on the way, and then Gumiho needs to be very careful. He needs to start setting up defensively, right? Praying for a concave, getting his Widow Mines burrowed, perhaps any tanks that he has, which are 0 at this point, set up and running. Gumiho's third base, perhaps not in the position that Creator was expecting, but nonetheless. We do have Creator looking to attack into this position. Gumiho is going to be able to get a concave as well as some reinforcements. Creator might not have the best time doing so, but he is trying to take advantage of his Colossus. I was going to say Colossus range. And while they do still have more range, they do not have extended thermal lance. Perhaps having to temporarily sacrifice that because of the loss of his second Colossus. He was supposed to already be up at 3 a while ago. Only just now getting there. And actually adding on a 4th, it seems like Creator does still prefer the 4 Colossus. This attack is now turning into a bit of a base trade. I'm actually surprised that Gumiho was the one that kind of initiated it. It looks like he did not expect Creator to be on the offense. He does, however, find the reinforcing Colossus, is now looking for the Robo in the natural. He's definitely going to find it. That is a good attempt at a Chrono Boost, but it ain't going to work. But it is a full-on base trade, ladies and gentlemen. Creator heading into the production line. Needs to get on top of the production. That will be the death blow to Gumiho. And Gumiho, well, also wants to do something similar. Needs to get on top of the production of his opponents, take out some of these pylons, and then hope that the rest of his army is enough to take care of his opponents. That is the question, though, as it looks like the remnants of Gumiho's reinforcements are going to be taken out without contributing very much to this fight at all. Does Gumiho's main army take on Creator's? It's got 1-1 versus 0-0, but no strong response to the Colossus and the Phoenix. Even as he tries to grab a couple of Vikings, the Phoenix is still around. So the Colossus are still going to be plenty healthy and involved in the fight. The Vikings hardly did anything. Everywhere's blinking and not sure exactly where to tune into. What is most important? I can just say that's the priority for both players to take down production. And Gumiho has lifted everything that he can, but again, Phoenix are around. It's going to be a real painful point of this base trade. If the Phoenix are all gone, there'd be a little more complicating factors, you know, potential for a draw, I suppose. And for Creator, I guess he actually kind of has to worry about losing his last building. Which is why he's, well, he already had this slapped down for earlier, but he's also already trying to establish his Nexus so that he is not revealed. In about 30 seconds, Gumiho will realize that the reveal has not happened, and he will know that there is another Nexus somewhere. He's also rebuilding some of his own production. He's going towards a factory ASAP, actually. 2 factories on the way. He seems like he is well practiced in the base trade. He knows exactly what he wants to do in this situation, and that strong decision-making sometimes is the reason people win base trades, right? Base trades can very easily flummox people. You know, you're just going like, I don't know what to do. What do I do? What do I do? Oh my god, oh my god. If you have a strong decision, at least that gives you some backbone. And factories can produce tanks, and tanks can help you siege up and turtle. Gumiho has enough minerals for a command center, and he is rebuilding. Oh, the natural seems a little testy. I think he maybe would have gone for the main base. Bunkers are down. 3 of them set up with Marauders, Wood of Mines, and a Missile as well. The army of Gumiho, though, is looking awfully small. 51 army supply to 88. The Colossus might not be able to tear down bunkers very quickly, but there's not a whole lot of SCVs that can repair them. So, I mean, eventually, Gumiho will run out of money. He doesn't have the repair money. He's at 24 minerals after the command center. He might have to cancel the command center just to try and salvage, save the bunkers. And then, of course, he will want to salvage them eventually. I love the micro gear. The Marauders looking to take down the Colossus as they are the ones, you know, making themselves a little vulnerable, trying to reach forward as they are. Bunker number 1 goes down as the SCVs were not on auto repair. I think, especially because he doesn't want them repairing the medevacs, I would say. Instead of repairing, he's letting the energy of the medevacs hold on to this pseudo wall. But it's only one Marauder able to tank. The rest of them are in the bunkers, which are about to fall. Gumiho not able to take on the Colossus. The Colossus, the real problem, and that is it. Creator on the base trade will win 2-1 and move on to face Dark in a PvZ winners match. Now we are in the winners match of GSL Group C, round of 16. The bottom left, it is Dark, defeating Special 2-1. The top right, it is Creator, defeating Gumiho 2-1, so not a good day for Terrence. So, Creator did surprisingly well against Gumiho, actually. The way that he was able to maneuver out of difficult situations was impressive, because I think I was right to point out, you know, lack of upgrades and the difficult Colossus transition and all that good stuff, but he managed to control it just well enough. He's now facing Dark in a PvZ. You know, Gumiho could have been a lot trickier, but it's not like Gumiho always does something super tricky or super all-in or anything like that. It's just that he is more prone to than some other Terrans. I would say Dark is going to be a hell of a lot more aggressive than Gumiho was. You know, even thinking back to the first game, right, with the battle cruisers. You know, both Gumiho and Creator seem to be playing a little more of a straight-up situation, to a degree. Creator did still try and go for some more mid-game oriented attacks. But yeah, I really think that Dark, if he doesn't do something straight up cheesy in this series, he is still going to go for primarily mid-game, max out busts, Ling Banling, Roach Ravager situation. But Creator would be the, you know, as the Protoss in this matchup, would usually be the one to set the tone a little bit at the beginning. Does he go for Resident Enclaves? Then Dark would be more cautious and have to emphasize defending that before actually going into his plan. Is he going to go into Stargates, plural, which again would mess up Dark? Or is it just going to be simple Stargate, triple Oracle into Blink? Is it going to be a very aggressive Blink build? So, you know, if Dark isn't going to do something on 3 bases, 2 base Ling Olin, Proxy Hatch, 3 base Roach Ravager attack, whatever, yeah, then Creator would be the one actually shoot first, I suppose. And it looks like he is planning on definitely shooting first. He's getting a Proxy Stargates. Yes. And a Proxy Stargates, usually, if it is successful, you know, it's not scouted, it's not figured out, I would say it does grab even upwards to 7 drones, because the Spore Crawlers aren't done. And the second queen isn't in position yet. Could grab even more, though. And that's what Creator's hoping for. Make this game nice and easy. So far, Dark does not know about the Proxy Stargate. He knows it's a Stargate, probably off the Cybernetics Core warp gate timing. But it would so typically be placed in the main base. That's where he's heading now. but the problem is that the Oracle will already be out by the time he realizes, hey, there's no second pylon, and there's no Stargate either. He still won't know, because this could be a third pylon. You know, the Stargate could have been placed over here. He will know as soon as the Oracle flies in, and here comes the Oracle now. No Spore Crawlers, because you usually wouldn't need them if it was a typically placed Oracle. And again, no second Queen in a position either. The first Queen, I mean, not even perfectly in position, right? So the Oracle is going to grab, as I said, 5? I guess it could even go up to 7 in a really ideal scenario. It really needs to grab 5, I think, to be successful. 6. Gonna go for 6? Nah, can't go for 6. Alright, so not the, like, bestest one ever, but still effective. 5 drones can already be 5 more than you'd usually get with a typical Oracle. The problem is, of course, you will lose access to your Stargate, so if you're planning on moving over into a more typical 3 Oracle play, then you can't. Second Oracle does find only 1 Queen defending, so it grabs a couple more drones, and there is the 8 kills. I guess that I was more so suspecting. But the Queens on the low ground were able to come in fast enough to help out. As far as mitigating the damage, Dark did the best that he could, but he just really had no idea it was being proxied. If he'd been able to find it before the first Oracle, that would have been terrible for Creator. If he would have been able to find it before the second Oracle even, that also would have been a little worse for Creator. But as it is, I think Creator got what he wanted, and he's following up with a 2-base charge all in. Oh, snap. It's classic PVZ, man. You do not see this very often anymore. I was going to say, he still has 4 gases, so he should be adding on Archons. And I have no doubt this is a very dedicated attack. There is that. The truth is, this is very, very dedicated. What might be a little weird is that this could do just enough damage to make it still end up being a game playable for both parties. And then Creator could still maybe go into a 3rd base afterwards. But make no mistake, he definitely is looking to potentially end the game with this attack. The priority was absolutely on production and technology and units soon, I suppose. So the 3rd Nexus is going down. Did Dark scout the timing of the 3rd Nexus? He has not. I don't remember the last time he even scouted the 3rd Nexus at all. So he has no idea that his opponent has put all this priority on top of production. 6 gateways of charge lots, the Warp Prism, the Archons, starting the harassment, so he knows at least that much, and he should be expecting charge lots as the option, the composition. The problem is that there are going to be 6 charge lots warped in at a time with the Archons. Dark has managed to get his drone count back up to 57. Does he have the army count to deal with this? Well, he's already bought in so much time. The fact that the Zealots couldn't be warped in on that high ground is already 8 extra seconds that Dark really needs. So Creator's dedication to this attack might not be panning out. Archons are pretty good when the roaches are all caught up like this, but the Warp Prism being target fired means that there might be an evacuation necessary. Oracle gets target fired, so no stasis trap, and the Archons were firing away for a while, so a couple of Queens did get killed. This overall did not do a tremendous amount of damage. Dark is up to 66 drones on 3 bases against Creator's 53 on 3. It's not that bad. It basically did the damage required to make this a macro game, like I was kind of talking about. And not direct damage, but the indirect one, where Dark can't not take us seriously. He had to build roaches, so he wasn't building drones in a 4th base. Dark has a kind of surprise strategy up his sleeve. The Spire has yet to be scouted. And I don't know if Creator has picked up on anything else to make him wary. Didn't see the 4th gas. Saw this 5th gas? Well, this looks like his 4th, actually. It looks like his 3rd, actually. Yeah, so Creator doesn't know there's 6 gas is taken. You can't confirm that there's no evolution chamber. Could just be somewhere you didn't scout. And the roach numbers were totally fine. That seems like a good number of roaches to deal with the thing that I attacked the guy with, right? So you're not even picking up on a lackluster army. So TLDR, Creator has no idea. And Creator could be in a little bit of trouble. He does have some stack defense at his 3rd base, a simple shield battery, nothing in the other bases. And his only form of anti-air are the Archons, which are brilliant when there's a direct fight, but not so much if the mutas are running around. So this could be problematic. The observer is about to see the mute as if creator was paying attention. A cannon is coming down, a Stargate as well, so we definitely saw something about 10 seconds ago. He is on to Dark's trickery. The Colossus being popped out are not going to help against the mutas, but they are still going to be essential for the rest of this game, whether Dark goes into mass mutiling, baneling, or back into roaches. So it's just a matter of dealing with the first 10 mutas. So far, so good. In fact, the muta's actually getting corralled right now as Creator had the Archons placed around his bases. Missing one of the main now, as that one pylon could depower the Stargate. Indeed it will. He could power with the Warp Prism if you really want to be fancy, but... Nope, trying to just ferry around the Archons to catch these damn things. Starting to actually get some probe damage, too. That took a while for how surprising the mutas were supposed to be. The mutas have not been super effective. It's more the question of, are they a big enough distraction to allow Dark's second attack do damage? With Creator still content on 3 bases, I don't think this attack is going to really be all that impressive. It's no Banelings, no Ravagers. By the way, thank you Zero Sum for the 4-month resub. Thanks for the compliment. Yeah, the mutas, they are still flying around. They are still finding probe damage. They are still distracting. And doing a little bit of scouting as well. They just scouted the 4th base location. Dark is going to continue building into mutas. He's up to 22 now, about to be at 27 with +1 flyer attack. His ground army has at least +1 melee on it. But again, no Banelings, no Ravagers. This is a very, very basic army. As the mutas are tier 2, and with an upgrade, they are not direct fighting units. So this army that's being built up over here is actually not the biggest problem. If Creator had really fumbled the ball harder at any point in this game, right? Dedicated too much to that one charge attack and failed and lost his Archons and his Warp Prism, this could have been much deadlier. If he had fumbled the defensive mutas and allowed 20 probes to die, this could have been the killing blow. The big max out of the Zerg player could have been the killing blow. But as it is, I think Creator has done a really good job stabilizing. The muta count, if it continues to grow, though, always is a threat for a base trade ending, in which Stalkers and Archons generally do not win, in my opinion. This is also a great distraction. Creator has no idea. The second army was planning to attack his 4th base. Nothing there to defend. A simple kill. And, well, I was just complimenting Creator. It looks like the runaround has finally got to him. And yeah, he has to tap out. GG. Yeah, the problem was that, like, when it was 11 mutas, it's fine. When it's 15 mutas, it's fine. When it's 20, it might still be okay if you have, like, static defense and Archons in every location. But then, as it gets to 25 and 30, they can take on Archons, even with static defense, and they can have multiple options. I mean, they can kill bases, they can kill army, they can kill outside infrastructure, and they could base trade if Creator just decided to push. So he really did do a decent job of holding on. And he was looking like he was going to stabilize, but he never got up to a high Phoenix count. I guess that's what he really needed. GG's. Dark will take game 1. In the bottom right, up 1, he is Dark. The top left, we have Creator. I really do want to applaud Creator. I mean, I feel like the surprise mutas, he got a glimpse of them to have some defense, but it really was quite late. I thought it was good, and then it got to the count of 15 and even to 20, and it still seemed like Creator was on the right track. He was up to 4 bases. His army was decently sized. Like, the 150 supply hurdle for PvZ seemed to be overcome. But then the muta count continued to grow, and I guess the eventual problem of mutas, that's that mass muta problem, eventually reared its ugly head. He needed something more concrete to deal with them, which would be Phoenix. A lot of Blink Stalkers sometimes can do the trick as well, but he also took a very long time to get to Blink. So Phoenix really would have been the answer if he had gotten to, let's say, 8 Phoenix. Probably would have been doing okay. If he had certainly gotten to 6 with range on them, that also might have been okay. But you would have also had to been very good at controlling. So it is a lot of pressure. It's a very difficult game for the Protoss, I think, when the setup is like that. Which is why I do applaud Creator for what he did. But I guess I I got too caught up in, like, the Protoss not dying immediately to realize that the big picture was still rather problematic if Dark went for mass mutas. So I think Dark realized that a max out of ground army wasn't maybe going to be particularly effective, so he just went dedicated to mutas. You know, upgrades for them and going up to even a count of 30 was his goal. And the ground army that he did build just was, you know, at least it was mobile, so it killed a 4th base. So yeah. That game probably would have been a lot easier if Creator had been up against someone swapping back into ground army. That probably would have been a lot easier for him. And that's why Dark didn't do it. Dark was like, I know what's going to work here. Well, it is what it is. Creator got a decent start at the beginning of the game with the proxy oracles. I'd say pretty good. But then his follow-up charge on Archon attack was not as good as maybe he was hoping. Again, I think it basically was a wash. He did the damage to a Zerg player, which was keeping them from droning and expanding, but it didn't really kill a lot of shit. And then for Dark, he was in an okay position to go into mutas, but I suppose there wasn't a guarantee that he wouldn't have had some trouble if Creator had decided to, like, attack again or something. I mean, I guess it kind of was, as long as Dark was getting to mutas in a high number without any damage happening on his side of the map. I guess it was just more and more obviously going Dark's way. The Creator had kind of similar issues as far as the general way of explaining things goes in his last series, in which it seemed like he was in a problematic position, and then he was able to recover almost against the odds. So I guess I believed in him in the first game. Didn't pan out. I still believe in him for the second game and the series overall. But Dark is a very feisty opponent who can do all the Zerg things, and so is especially scary to go up against because he's basically a 10 out of 10 on all things Zerg. All compositions, all styles, all forms of like aggressive versus defensive, you know, the way that he plays. Like, he can do everything. I guess I've said that he's basically a 9 out of 10 on everything. Like, maybe he's not the actual best at any one of these things. Perhaps Cyril is a better defensive Zerg player than Dark will be, but, you know, it's like 9 out of 10 on like 20 different qualities is pretty frippin' cool to have. You're not the jack of all trades, master of none. You're very close to being a master of literally everything. And God forbid Dark ever actually cranks that up to 10 out of 10 and everything, because then he would actually be winning every single tournament. But it seems that at some point in tournaments, there's always that one thing he's just 9 out of 10 on that the other guy does 10 out of 10, and then he drops out. I'd say last GSL, the thing that he was lacking was kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? He was lacking... as the oracles just flying and do a bunch of damage, but then die. That's not good. I would not say that was worth the loss of an oracle. Well, actually, maybe I could say it was. Maybe it was excusable. Actually, if you lost both, definitely not. Definitely not. But I was trying to say that in the last GSL, I think Dark had a problem with basically energy. Like how long he could last throughout the group, because he played fine for most of his round of 4. Not group, sorry, best of 5. No, it was groups. Yeah, that's right. It wasn't round of 4. He played fine for most of the round of 8, and then he just like tripped to the finish line. It was very odd. I think Dark was almost like he was basically supposed to win against Dark, against Beyond. Sorry. So yeah, it's like Dark is supposed to be winning everything, but there's always that like one thing that trips him up. Anyways, the Oracle did sacrifice itself, but like I've been kind of hemming and hawing about, I think it's kind of okay. What's maybe not okay is if Dark had actually gotten into the natural, which he does not. Creator, so far, getting the better trade going. Kills Lings, kills an Overlord as well. Got Blink and +1 on the way. And should be okay against these Lings, yeah, especially because they don't even have their +1. And Dark has gone into +1 melee. Banelings as well. Now adding on a Roach Warren. Very typical ZDP setup. I did read the FTC approved the acquisition. I'm not really super eager to talk about the Microsoft acquisition frequently because nothing happens quickly. So I've talked about how much I think that Microsoft would be better in charge of Blizzard, but there's no point in kind of bringing it up every single time they pass a barrier because it seems like we all can agree they will force this thing through because they're big dick in it, you know, just swinging that thing around, money everywhere, money in people's pockets, good old fashioned bribery could be at hand. I'm not saying it is, but it could be. And it will happen, but it'll take a very long time to actually happen, and it'll take a very long time to actually affect StarCraft. So there you go. We do have the move out from Creator. He does have 6 gases. I think he is planning on moving forward, but he is going to do an attack. He's got a Warp Prism with it. He wants to do some damage with this Blink and +1 timing. Dark, is he prepared for it? He's got +1 melee, 40 lings, but not much else. And I do think he needs a little bit more to actually work here. The force fields and adepts, I think, are going to work wonderfully to help out against the lings, but nice counter corrosive biles, make sure those lings weren't trapped. Many of them do end up escaping, but I really like Creator's first composition coming in here. The lings are not as effective as they would like. They're not getting surrounds on pure stalker armies like would be ideal. They got to get past force fields and adepts as well. And frankly, the amount of stalkers on Dark's doorstep is already too much. Creator hitting a very nice timing, and Dark perhaps a little too greedy. Did not make enough army fast enough and was unable to stop this or halt this or slow it down at any time. It went from 0 to 100 very quickly. And Dark is back down to 3 bases, still with not enough lings to really be a threat, I believe, and certainly not enough Roach Ravager. The army of Dark, despite only being 20 army supply below his opponents, looks more like it's like 40 supply below. Now it comes together. Some reinforcing Ravagers, I guess, were missing from the equation. Now they're here. So are the drones. The emergency pull of the drones is not a good sign, as there are still so many stalkers left over. An aggressive blink forward as he realizes he's got a chance. Not even bothering with the Guardian Shield. There we go. The Guardian Shield will still be helpful, but it looks like Creator's got this in the bag no matter what he does. Maybe playing with fire a little bit, but Dark cannot spend his money. If Dark had 1,000 minerals spent a while ago, I blinked and I missed it, but I believe, yeah, 4 queens started up. That's what took up most of his minerals. If he was able to spend 1,000 minerals 1 minute ago, I do not think this is snowballing. I think Creator actually is overconfident and did just blink into too many units. But 1,000 minerals banked up only to be spent on 4 queens that aren't going to be involved in the fight particularly quickly. And when they are, they're not that great. Yeah, that's not good enough. That is not good enough. Dark still losing drones, by the way, as Adept snuck over to the 3rd base. And Dark just knows that he is on his last legs. Even if he does push this back, he will not be ahead in this game. Assuming that Creator escapes with any amount of army left over. I suppose if Creator does get surrounded and corrosive bile, he might still be screwed, but it's no, it should not happen. Creator should always have an ability to retreat. He's grabbing his 4th base. +2 was started up a while ago, so will impact further battles. And Robotics Bay is on the way as well for some very easy-to-use Colossus, right? These stalkers, man, you gotta blink micro them, you gotta be worried if they're dying. Yeah, man, no. Colossus make this so much easier. He might go in Disruptors, actually, which would require also more micro, but they could get some really good shots now. Colossus would make this so much easier, I think. Now, Dark is trying to move on with life, despite losing appendages. He's missing an arm and a leg right now, but he's like, well, you gotta do what you gotta do. Just gotta keep on going, right? Life's a garden, dig it. You need to watch Joe do it again, man. Hive's on the way. But what is the Hive really gonna give him? Vipers to help out against the Colossus would be very helpful. That is true, but the reason I'm not exactly thrilled about that is that the rest of the Protoss army is still pretty intimidating. So, okay, you take the Colossus out of the equation, but does that just solve all of your problems? Probably not. But it is, of course, better than not having Vipers to then just let the Colossus beam down on your army, right? And then you might also be able to add some Cracklings on. You add in the Viper Abducts to a Ling Surrounds, and that could be some magic. Dark is looking for still one magical moment, even though it looks like he has recovered. I would say he has certainly not. He still is on kind of like a one-punch army. Creator on 4 bases has a little bit more of that wiggle room should things go a little bit bad. He'll be okay. But if Dark takes a fight that's even a little bit bad, he's actually in a lot of trouble. If Dark can hold, either win a fight or just keep Creator second-guessing, committing, Dark might be able to get up to 4 bases with a decent economy. But Creator is not second-guessing. He's got 4 Colossus, plenty of Sentries, and a lot of Stalkers with +2/1. And Dark has managed to grab 2/1/1 and is trying to grab further upgrades. He's also trying to get those Vipers involved, but it's 4 Colossus, and I'm not sure there's enough Abducts. Colossus number 1 goes down. Colossus number 2 is also a goner, but 2 more are still impactful. Oh, and the Stalkers blink forward. That might be a little overzealous. Corrosive Biles was still raining down. More to come as well, and Creator is making this a tougher battle than I think he had to. Did not have to blink forward like that, but still looks like he might be able to win it. Colossus is going to get microed in the Warp Prism to save their lives, but now going to have to fully retreat as the Warp Prism no longer able to reinforce. Dark's last remnants of the army will not be enough, but that was a lot closer than I think it had to be. GG, Creator does win game number 2. Last game of the winner's match. In the top right of Altitude, we have Dark. In the bottom left, it is Creator. Creator getting that 3 base blink +1 attack to do most of the work of that game. Basically, after that, it was fairly easy. I say fairly because Dark really did make a very solid attempt to come back. And Creator, it was like Dark's ability to make a comeback happen and play a very scrappy game was highlighted, and then Creator's ability to get a little overconfident and a little trigger happy was also displayed. So it came out to be a little closer than, again, I think it really had to be. I think if we're talking about the absolutely perfect play there from that point of the damage of the Blink Stalker attack, I'm thinking the game could have ended with like a 160 supply versus 120 supply kind of thing, right? As opposed to a 120 versus 90. Like, they both were taking a lot of problems there. But it is, you know, a win's a win, so not really much point to criticize it. I think Creator only made it as close as it did because he knew he was so far ahead, and should it have actually been scrappy, he would have been a little more careful. So what happens in game 3? They clearly are well matched for each other. I didn't really say this in the beginning, but now I'll say it. I do believe Creator was once again coming in as a little bit of an underdog. I said that versus Gumiho just because of his feelings on PvT, but otherwise I thought their history in StarCraft 2 is rather similar as far as their victories and challenges and whatnot. But Dark certainly has, again, more victories in the prestigious tournaments, especially recently. Creator has had a couple of really cool moments, and some of them against Dark. This is actually a bit of a rivalry at this point. Yet Dark still remains a bit higher on those expectations, right? And he does seem to clutch it out a little bit more when he does face Creator. So it's not that Creator is coming in here like David versus Goliath, but it is kind of a sore point for Creator, in which that could be affecting his mentality, and it also could just be a straight up, like, you know, not skill issue, but player versus player issue, right? There are just some players that are always going to have your number to a certain degree. So I think we all kind of sympathize for Creator here. We look at him, we just want to pinch his cheeks and tell him everything's going to be okay. Dark is a manly man. He's got his little mustache going on, and we're not as concerned about him. But for Creator, it's always feels like there's a little bit more on the line emotionally. And then it's also, for me, I feel like he's sometimes like glass. You know, like I drop him and he's going to shatter. He does something worse than he should, and he shatters. He loses the winner's match in the GSL after getting so close to advancing, and he shatters. Dark's some type of, I don't know, brick. You just drop him and he actually does damage to you, and you're like, oh, I really shouldn't mess with this guy. So I'm kind of hoping for Creator to win this one, just so I think it might be... This is very dramatic, I realize that, but I feel like if Creator doesn't win this one game to advance on to the round of 8, I don't think he makes it out of the group. Where if Dark loses this, I actually think he still would. 2 Adepts get into the main base and actually do some serious damage. Usually you'd kind of gloss over this, but I think the 2 Adept sacrifice was worth it. Really would have liked to have seen a 6th drone, I think, though. So that's a kind of sucky. Man, I'm thinking about who I would have guessed made it out of this group when I first looked at it. And I sort of said Dark first, for sure. And then I think I would have gone with Gumiho. Yeah. I think Special would play really cool games and really close games, but then just ultimately fizzle out. And then for Creator, I just would be so worried about his mentality. But he is in the winner's match, and he is doing fine in this game. He just got 4 more drones with the Oracle that lived, so very much winning out in the beginning of the game. Void Ray surprise! No one expects the Void Ray anymore. Kills the Overlord of Dark, that's the Scouting Overlord, as well as one that he needed to not be supply blocked. He was not building Overlords anytime soon. I think he Roberts Bob for the 20 months as well. So that's a very interesting opener that actually throws a lot of doubt into the Zerg's mind whenever a Void Ray pops out nowadays. Different metas, it's the expected thing, and certainly years ago I think it was a lot more expected as well, but yeah, nowadays it's like, what are you doing? What's going on here? 5 drones and a temporary spore is worth it for 2 Adepts. I think so. I think it would have been a no-brainer if it was 6. I'm really splitting hairs here. But certainly the Oracle coming in and grabbing the damage it did has been has confirmed Creator's victories in the first 5 minutes. But now he loses an Oracle, and that seemed very obvious that was going to die. So that was certainly an overextension there from Creator. 15 drones in total, though. I mean, you look at the resources lost now, and it actually still looks very fine. 15 drones is a lot. 15 drones is really throwing off Dark. As he also got that supply block and is dangerously close to another one. I think he actually is officially supply blocked. He's supposed to be making drones for like 5 seconds right there. 5 seconds to be a big deal in a pro game. And the Oracle, it is still alive. There's a buddy once again. The buddy is defending the 3rd base, so no problems over there. And the other Oracle is getting scouting. Because I'm sure Creator, after all the damage done to his opponents, is starting to wonder, like, are you just going to all-in me? Are you just going to get frustrated and kill me? Dark is certainly in no place to do so, but good to confirm that. War Prism on the way alongside a bunch of gateways. We're talking about very basic units, however. Creator is going to walk across the map with nothing but basic Stalkers, I would assume. And a Void Ray, I assume. And this is going to be a big surprise. Or... yeah, it's 8 gateways total. Yeah, no, he has to be doing an attack. What a weird attack, though. Could he not have fit in a Twilight Council? I guess not. Okay, well, Dark. If he was planning on getting no damage taken for the next 2 minutes, right? Like, oh, this guy's clearly not setting up for an attack. He doesn't have anything to work with. He'd be very wrong. He does need to go back to making army. He's gotten up to 67 drones once again. He's got his lair, so he is producing roach speed, but it's not there yet, and no upgrades for either party. Creator going for one of the basic, almost Wings of Liberty attacks here. Did bring the Void Ray. That went down lickety-split. Guardian Shield and plenty of force fields with the Immortal anchoring this push is starting to find something. Canceling at least the cocoons of these Ravagers, but Creator's supply not looking super convincing. I guess army supply-wise, it's kind of close. I just fear the Corrosive Bio addition is what really makes these attacks not so impressive. That in the high ground, and the Wall of Queens helping out. The Spore Crawler, surprisingly obnoxious. Spine Crawler there to support too. He's gonna have to find a different angle of attack. This looks a little more promising. The Ravagers now looking more vulnerable than they did on that high ground. However, the queens are here, and they'll have transfuses and soak up the damage. I believe the Immortal actually punching the queen, as opposed to the much better roaches. But here we go. Stalker's actually moving forward aggressively. More warpins as the Oracles also add in their pulsar beam damage. The Ravagers are, for the most part, being kept alive, but the reinforcements are looking awfully sparse for Dark. Creator might just do it here with a basic Protoss attack. One that really has become more obsolete because of Ravagers. I mean, that is actually directly the reason they have been made, to take away the power of the force field that usually protects an army such as this. Couple of last-second force fields going down on the ramp, stop the drone pool, and a couple of roach reinforcements. The Immortal still trying to get some damage done. The Warp Prism still able to warp in as the Ravagers have been pushed off to the left side too far. The Warp Prism is now under attack. Perhaps the Queen goes for the focus fire, but there's not enough Queens to actually do so. Where are the rest of the Queens? I think they should be pulled forward as well. Drone's not mining, but also not engaging, is awfully close here. The Warp Prism goes into micro mode, but the Ravagers that were retained from earlier on really show them their strength, and the little bits of reinforcements of the Roaches finally overwhelming the army of Creator. It looked promising when he moved those Stalkers in, but everything came in as to collapse at the last second, and Dark is able to hold. Unfortunate news for Creator, who did sacrifice a lot of technology to do that. Fortunately for Creator, he didn't sacrifice all that much economy. He actually was building probes to saturation on 3 bases with all 6 gases, and is now grabbing a 4th base. And because Dark had to take that so freaking seriously, he did not get a chance to drone up himself. So now he's getting back into it, and it is the question of what race recovers faster from such a situation. I would argue the Zerg does, personally. The Zerg has a lot more flexibility in deciding the mass drone versus mass army. So obviously right now, as you know, the Protoss numbers have been culled. The army of theirs has to be rebuilt, and it's a very expensive process. You know that you can get the drones up. You know that you can get your base up, you can get your feet set, and then you can get into technology. And it looks like, well, this is an interesting decision. I actually wasn't expecting Swarm Host when I saw the Infestation Pit. I thought it was for Hive, but I guess the Nidus Swarm also coming down would have given me a bigger hint that it is going to be Swarm Hosts. So I was thinking, he has time to get his feet set. He can get to a max out army plus potential of Vipers, right? A very late game composition, but one that can be safely gotten to because you just deflected this very basic Protoss attack. But instead, Dark decides that a Swarm Host play might be the killing maneuver. I think he's right. I do think he's right. I would be a little scared if Creator had dived towards, for instance, Archons and Storm once he realized what was going on, which now he should. The Nidus Swarm in this particular location is a very obvious Swarm Host tell. Plus, the Oracle might have gotten in to see the Infestation Pit. No, it did not. But that Nidus Swarm is enough for me, I believe. So he knows what's up. He might now try to add on that Templar Archives, but he can hardly afford it. Despite getting his 4 bases set up, he did have to replace all of that army that he sacrificed. So that took up most of his change. The Stalkers do have Blink now, but there's no charge lots for run-bys or for tanking. There's no Archons with shield batteries to tank all the damage, and Creator is in a lot of trouble. The supply is very deceiving in multiple ways. We know that Roach Swarm Host is deceiving for the Zerg, but even for Creator, I would say his army supply is deceiving. He has no upgrades, and his technology is very limited. If he avoids the Swarm Host, Locust, however, I do believe his numbers and his micro ability specifically does beat the Roach Ravager of Dark. Defender's advantage also kicking in, right? Yeah, it does look that way. But the Swarm Host will always be a complication. There'll either be Locusts involved with the fights, or they'll be attacking from different locations. Not to mention, this Nidus Swarm could be used for other things. It doesn't have to be Swarm Hosts that pop out of it. The Swarm Host could be with the main army, and this could be 20 Lings. And that would be a big problem. It could also be 2 or 3 Lurkers. And we do have the Lurker Den on the way. Dark has a lot more time to play around than Creator does, especially because Creator had to sacrifice his 4th base. His Immortals went looking out for the Nidus Swarm and instead caught the Locusts and the Lings, and Creator does seem to be on his way to petering out. Just basically dying a very, very slow death. It's time to all in. I do agree with that 100%. Time to all in. It's your only chance, and it is your best chance. You don't pro pool in this matchup, but if you could, this would also be the opportunity to do so. Ooh, an aggressive blink forward, thinking he found the opportunity to find the vulnerable Ravagers. He might not be wrong. The Oracles getting that vision for him was very helpful, but the Swarm Host will defend temporarily. Locusts expire. And Creator has just enough economy to reinforce. Now +1 Stalker. Still not particularly impressive, but better than nothing. Robotics Bay on the way, I think, for a couple of Hail Mary disruptors. And +2 is also on the way. Creator feeling like this attack, you know, it either wins the game, which is fantastic. That would be ideal, wouldn't it? But it's not. Or it pressures Dark enough that Creator might be able to recover economically back at home. Yes, he is going to try and get that 4th base reestablished. But Dark's immediate transfer over into Lurkers has really ruined the potential of Creator, I feel like. The Lurkers are so difficult to break through. But I do love this. The blink into the main base. The Lings try to respond, but they are upgradeless Lings, so they're not particularly effective. Locust will respond as well, but Creator might still have room to maneuver. He's trying to get out of the way, but the drones are pulled to stop the Stalkers, and the recall is not good enough. So many Stalkers still went down there. More to fall as they were not caught in the recall, and that ended up turning very, very bad for Creator. I liked it until I didn't. You know what? I really like it if the Swarm hosts did not have Locusts. If he had baited the Locust wave on this low ground and then blinked, I think that would have been a lot better, right? That would have been a lot of damage done. Because he was going to win against the pure Ling Roach Ravager, I think. But not against the Locusts, which have the upgrades, by the way. +2 affecting Locusts, too. Oh, Creator, I think he lost too much, man. That was so many Stalkers. Like, that recall took forever. 66 Stalkers have died in this game. And now the Lurker counterattack is going to be even more troublesome. Locust in the main base as well. More Nidus Rooms coming down. Dark knows he's got the momentum and is looking to advance on to the round of 8 in GSL. Creator is giving him a hell of a fight, but it is a tale told of time, I suppose. Dark winning the scrappy last game versus Creator, and Creator now having to play out the rest of a tournament discouraged as he was inches away from victory, and Dark has once again stopped him. It is becoming a very familiar tale between the two. GG. Dark advances to the round of 8, and Creator will have to wait for the winner of Gumiho versus... And now we're in the losers match, the lower match, the elimination match, whatever you want to call it. In the bottom right, it is Gumiho. In the top left, it is Special. Special gave a very solid attempt to win against Dark. Very solid indeed, but did not. And Gumiho tried his best against Creator, but possibly a couple of missed opportunities, actually. The games were somewhat complicated. But he did not win. Now it's a TVT to determine who meets Creator. Perhaps once more for Gumiho, or for the first time for Special. I am worried about about Creator, but I'll get there when I'll get there. I'll say for now, this TVT might just be one of the hardest ones to call. I think Gumiho is kind of favored because, again, just classic Korean Terran phrase. It's like literally a saying, you know, Korean Terran. It instills fear into the hearts of all the pro gamers around the world. Versus, you know, Special, who is like pseudo-Korean because he's been there for so long, able to move back as well after having some trouble during COVID. Thank you, Oriental Habit, for the tier 3 15 months. Big appreciation for that. So, anyways, he does stay a lot in Korea, and he does tend to respect... No, that's not the right word. I mean, he emulates the Korean Terrans to a certain degree, but I can't really choose the right word, because he respects everyone. I'm not going to say he disrespects anyone. But he often would be talking more about, I guess, what Koreans are doing. Is it kind of the best way I can put it? Because he doesn't emulate them. He emulates maybe TY, who is also a unique Terran, but as far as, you know, is he actually himself more like a Korean Terran than anything else? No, he's definitely his own brand of Terran. You know, people would always say that Neeb is basically a European Protoss, and I think that's pretty freaking true. But Special, despite all his time in Korea, despite his roots being in more of that Brood War Korean elitist type as well, not saying he's elitist, just that that's kind of the crowd he would hang out with, he's actually a rather special player. So they're both special players. They're both oddities as far as the Korean or pseudo-Korean Terrans go. And so I have no idea what it means for TVT between the two, as they also aren't prone to facing each other, I believe, despite both living in Korea most of the time. Reaper Marine versus Reaper Marine. Interestingly enough, usually this is an SCV, right? And usually Special has the fighting unit advantage, because he has defense advantage. So this is actually very odd. It never happens. The Reaper of Gumiho will survive, but have to retreat. The follow-ups for both players are very similar, but Gumiho is a little bit later towards Orbital. He's going into Hellion Opener compared to Special's still 1-1-1, no add-ons, which Gumiho, I believe, did not manage to scout the fact that there was a second Marine on the way. Which maybe it doesn't sound like a huge deal, but this is one more fighting unit than expected, after you already lost against their additional fighting unit, right? So it's a weird, very small detail, but one that could have contributed heavily if Gumiho was doing a slightly different build. I do believe that the Hellion follow-up is, you know, pretty much one of the safer builds to do. You just get a decent amount of decent early game units very quickly. They're not the best as time goes on, but they do the job as far as the early game. And it's, you know, Defender's Advantage will eventually kick in anyways. It's not like Special is proxying anything, so it is actually quite amusing that he continues to try and push the issue. Doesn't even get that one last Hellion, won't get this one either, and Special is going to just have to settle for a single Hellion kill because of a cheeky Widowmine. He's going to send another Hellion out? What? Stop it. Special almost sending out a comical number of units to try and push the issue, when it really feels like the issue is resolved. As soon as you realize it's Reactor Factory, it's really hard to convince yourself that you're going to find a lot of damage, but Special thought he had an opportunity. Perhaps this last unit was just because he was very eager to get a scout, and that makes sense. That's fine. That makes a lot of sense. He was very eager to get in there and see if it was going to be a Raven or a Banshee, which I'm only bringing up because Special is also going for a Banshee. So it's usually Raven, but can be a Banshee. Whether maybe he could have scouted if it was gases all taken as well and factories on the way, and he could have scouted it was a third CC. He didn't scout the third CC, though, because it's on location. Special's third CC is still faster, so it's going to make up for it, and actually it is Special who's going to be going into mech. Gumiho is going to be the one who needs to scout this. The Banshee, first Banshee, does not find too much damage, but it usually doesn't. It more sets the tone for the next couple of minutes, which is going to be Banshees harassing you. Hellions finally got to the other side of the map, by the way. Kind of forgot they existed. Single Cyclone's going to take them out eventually, but 6 SCVs and a Mule. I did not catch if that was fresh or not. Did go down, so a little disappointing there for Special. But what that didn't do was scout that it's mech. If there was 4 gases up and running right now, for sure, he'd be tipped off. But because it's only 3, I don't think Gumiho can determine that it is mech. There might be some, like, math, very detailed math going along, like well, he got Banshees instead of Ravens, and he needs this much gas for that, maybe. But I don't think Gumiho could do that on the fly. As far as I know, this is still kind of ambiguous. He might be a little more inclined to be wary of mech because of Special's reputation. But again, so far I don't see any sign that Gumiho knows it's mech. Banshee number 2 actually gets in and kills a lot of SCVs, plus the 2 Cyclones on the front lines, plus the Banshee in the natural. Missile turret is a little bit late. Cyclone of Gumiho does get the correct lock on. And oh, Special now using his Banshee on the offensive. Almost gets his opponent's Cyclone, but it barely lives. Meanwhile, his last Cyclone gets taken down, as at the last second he did start to miss micro. Now he's losing all of his units. Well, not that one. Nope, yes, that one. At least the Banshee was able to trade before it died. Very interesting sequence of events there. Lots of micro going down, while both of them were at a very low unit count. Finally, Gumiho gets the scan, and it's a good thing that he does. He really did need to determine if it was mech or bio. I'm pretty sure he was suspicious, again, based off of Special's reputation and it being neo-humanity as well for the first game. Very mech-likely, if there is a map to be mech-likely. So, good thing he scanned. He was probably wanting to for a while and just had to deal with everything else that was going down. As Banshee is looking for the tank, it will not find it, but the Cyclones are also looking, because I haven't really emphasized I had the opportunity to emphasize that this was beginning battle mech, kind of. He didn't just go straight into tanks. He is now going into tanks, but he went into cyclones and cyclone upgrades, something that Special is also a little more inclined to do than a lot of other Terrans. But he has done this even going into bio, but you know, it is mostly going into mech. But yeah, Gumiho now dealing with speed banshees and upgraded cyclones. Cannot seem to get enough army. This is a more aggressive and speedy type of mech than you would expect. Nonetheless, bio should be better at those. It should be speedy, and it should have a lot of units. More so than a battle mech player. And Gumiho is kind of having like trouble getting the count up. This is a pretty solid looking army, but not enough to defeat the tank count that is building unless all the interference matrix go down, which is possible. Specialist tank count about to be at 5. His 3 tanks could actually pop. Cyclones are guarding against this big old drop. I kind of like the idea of the big drop, but it's not going to work out. Does manage to catch one of the Banshees that was tracking it, I believe. And the second Banshee will also go down. Hard to say the additional Banshees... Oh, nice lock onto the tank right there. Hard to say the additional Banshees were worth it. I mean, the second Banshee definitely was, but 4 Banshees and Cloak and Pinwheels... Not sure it was worth it, but maybe it was. Special is at a good supply. Mech versus bio, when you're at an even supply, that's pretty good for mech. Still controlling his cyclones as well, getting bits of damage every here and there. The tank was definitely the biggest grab so far, and he would love to grab the Ravens, which is exactly what he looks to do. Raven number 1 goes down. Raven number 2 was in trouble, but the interference matrix do go off. This will cause a temporary evacuation of the 3rd CC. Uh-oh. Well, this is actually big danger. I mean, otherwise, this was locked up nice and tight, but nothing in the main base, and Special is now supply blocked as well. Production being camped, upgrades being focus fired. The only thing that can respond quickly are the Hellions and Cyclones, which are now no longer very good. They are not fighters. They are glass cannons. And Gumiho, from the 3rd base to the main, finds the correct 1-2 punch to kill Special. I think anything other than the drop in the main, Special's okay. But that was the killing blow. GG. Royal Blood for game number 2. In the bottom left, up 1, it is Gumiho. In the top right, we have Special, who is on his last life in the series, in the group, in the tournaments. Special really does have a familiar habit. Habit's not the right word. It's not him that controls it. It's kind of the same story for Special a lot of the time, which I don't particularly like explaining because it just feels like it's always negative. But the end result is that he does tend to lose in these tournaments more than he wins. So it's negative, right? I don't really like highlighting the negatives, but every time I highlight the positives of the way that Special plays, there's these caveats that really just make it so that you can't get too hyped. There's always that hesitation, like I brought up in the first series of the day. I don't watch these games since I'm going to cast them. I try very hard not to be spoiled, and for the most part, I've been pretty effective at that. The finals, I believe, got spoiled for me. No, the round of 4 got spoiled for me because I knew there was all Terrans last season. But yeah, I just kind of expected Special to have very similar games to a lot of his other tournaments. I mean, for the last, almost his entire career, really. You know, he's done very well against players that he is supposed to win against, but when it comes to the real, okay, this is going to be a tough one, he comes out with a really amazing build, and the plan makes a ton of sense, and it even looks super impressive for the first third of the game. And then it just kind of falls flat because there are some things that he's missing that I suppose a more typical build would have maybe covered. So the first game versus Dark was an example of when everything goes according to plan, and it looks perfect, it looks amazing, it looks brilliant. And then the last game of this series, it's the example of when things feel very cool and very good, and then they just go to shit very quickly. So it's like, kudos to his opponents, who are also, you know, I'm saying he wins against players you're supposed to win against. It's when it's tough that it's tough. So his opponent's just good enough to find those vulnerabilities, but it's kind of waiting for the day for Special to just actually win with every plan that he has. Because they're all good, and his execution, his actual mechanics should never be suspects, considering his career, but there's just always that one thing that happens that sets him off track. Now let's see if he can bring back in this series. Gumiho is going for a very aggressive Reaper Hellion opener. No, just Reapers, actually. He's already building the tech lab on the factory, so not actually that many Reapers. Yeah, it should only be 3. I saw the reacted Reapers, and I jumped ahead of myself. So actually not very aggressive at all. In fact, he could just use this defensively. He should be trying to find some damage, I suppose, but he doesn't know what his opponent's doing, really. They both are a little in the dark, roughly. They know that both have factory expanded. Anything other than that, I'm not sure. Gumiho's gone into a Cyclone and is still building up his star ports. Gumiho, I guess, yeah, going for the Reapers. Yeah, makes sense. And then for Special, he has actually gone up already into the 1-1-1, building a tank and a Liberator. He might actually be looking to push. It's a very early push. One that can be overwhelmed if it does not get sieged. But if it does get sieged, it's pretty dangerous. Ah, Gumiho's going to go in a second Cyclone and a Medevac as well. So he's going to have a lot of mobility. He's going to have the units that are very good in these low quantity, high quality situations as well. The Cyclone. Cyclone gets a lock on to a Marine, no one cares. Gets a lock onto a tank, everyone cares. And Special just simply won't have a lot of fodder units for the Cyclone to lock onto in error. Okay, Liberator into Medevac. Alright, alright, alright. So Liberator are going to siege up on the main base, and the Cyclones have just been picked up, so there is nothing here to defend for Gumiho, so this is pretty perfectly timed. But Gumiho, I was thinking more an exchange of army units in a straight-up battle. Didn't even think about just the fact that he can run around. Special does not have a Cyclone or a Viking to take care of anything that flies. So this, this drop's going to be effective. And the Cyclones on the front would have caught the moving units. We do see Special's in a little bit of trouble. The Liberator is getting taken care of just with a couple of Marines, and Special cannot park it anywhere that's safe, so it's actually not doing anything right now. It's just kind of panicking. Cyclones jump on top of the tank dead zone and actually managed to kill it with the help of the Reapers. Second tank was too late to the siege up Marines in the main base, getting lots of SCV kills. And everything has gone topsy-turvy and not in favor of the Mexican Terran. 8 workers down. More to fall. Maybe not, actually. That's 3 Marines in a tank. But still, not a good situation. Not a good situation. American accent is my accent. I believe it is called a... Ah, shoot. I forgot actually what it's called. I used to know. Someone else will think of it. Mid-Atlantic. Thank you. It is a Mid-Atlantic accent. Non-regional diction. Special is going to be going into a lot of Vikings. And again, should he have the ability to move his army across the map, it can be dangerous. But time is really ticking here. I mean, actually, that's not even correct. I would say his opportunity has already been missed, in fact. The idea is very powerful if things had been going the way they should have been already. So he should have been able to do a move out, not lose 8 SCVs, reinforce with his Vikings as the Liberator continued to siege up and be annoying. Everything went to shit for Special in the first 6 minutes, so his 6-minute attack, which is probably what he was supposed to hit, maybe it was supposed to be 7 minutes, but regardless, like, his first attack is not really all that intimidating. There will be some concern for Gumiho. He has to take this seriously, of course, but assuming that Gumiho kind of just crosses his T's, dots his I's, that type of thing, I don't think Special has a lot of power here. In fact, Special lower on the Viking counts and reinforcing slower, right? It's across the map. Is already kind of without a real strength in this push. He's already weak. Medevac was looking for a little bit of damage, just 4 Marines on that. Maybe trying to also distract the Vikings from the front lines. We are now at 6 Vikings for special to 5 of Gumiho, but Gumiho, again, the faster reinforcements. Gumiho is also, like, it's not a 2 starport push. Oh, it is. Now it is, but it's such a late 2 starport push. Okay. Yeah, so special will eventually win out in the Viking War, but it's happening so late in such an unideal circumstance. Gumiho, I think he's already past the point at which it was the scariest for him, as he grabs stim and is now working on combat shields. He still does not have his base under fire. That's really the biggest deal, is that nothing is actually important right now. He has to keep track of his army, but he's not being bombarded. He doesn't have to pull his SCVs, anything like that. So Special just has not found any start to this push. I would hardly call making it across the map a start, because he didn't even make it to his opponent's base. Additionally, it looks like more damage has been done by the medevac that returned back in. 11 SCVs killed with that medevac that had like 4 Marines in it. Now 7 Marines trying to get into the main base for Special. Kind of surprised he was making more Marines. Liberator is also shooting somewhere. Up there we go into natural, so 6 SCVs down for Gumiho as well. Some return damage finally happening here. And actually, a lot of return damage happening, but at a later point in time. Gumiho still up 7, 6 workers as finally this last Marine. Come on, come on, come on. Come on. Okay. So Gumiho's up 5 workers. He still has a far more saturated third base, and he is still building a stronger army as we head into the mid-game. Vikings and tanks in a proper position are freaking scary. Don't get me wrong. It's actually still a scary army. But if Gumiho gets any type of back attack, then it won't go so well for him. And Gumiho is doing exactly that. Gumiho actually going for a run-by. Vikings land on both sides. It's a slaughter for the Viking counts. But did it actually advance Special's cause as much as he wanted? Especially as these Marines, and the tank's actually quite funny. I don't know if the tank was a good idea, but the Marines charged into the natural to kill 17 workers. Special was almost all in, continuing to reinforce on the side of the map here. You know it's a gamble eventually. In TVT, eventually reinforcing is a bit of a gamble. And Special knew that this was a possibility and was just hoping he would have enough of a chokehold on Gumiho so Gumiho could never be able to do this, or he would have the right timing of reinforcements. With 24 SCVs dead, Gumiho really is just down to just surviving. Just survive and you will win. And Gumiho, again, if he gets some type of surround on this army, will have a much better chance of breaking this contain. His army, the medevac managed to barely survive. I'm not even sure what that was doing, honestly. Vikings landed on the ground for Special Ever, looking to kill this tank. Will kill the tank. No response from the SCVs on the repair. Gumiho, now maybe a little scared. Does probably have to pull the SCVs, but he's going to come in from 2 different angles. Here we go. SCV's being pulled. There it is. That's a weird pull, but there it is. Here's the collapse. All of the army coming forward. Combat shields now done on the Marines to survive that first tank blast. And there it is. Gumiho, after an extended defense, does defend and takes the 2-0. Special, unfortunately, knocked out of the GSL. Gumiho will get a chance again to face Creator to see who moves on to the round of 8. And now, the decider match. Who will join Dark in advancing to the round of 8 of GSL? In the bottom right, we have Creator, who is once again facing off against Gumiho. This was the first match of the day, and already in Group B, I talked about the rematch curse, which I believe is absolutely true. Don't care what the stats say. I don't need your facts. I have my own truth. But seriously, it actually did happen in Group B, where the rematch swapped the victors. So it does, of course, happen. And I still am a little more confident in Gumiho's victory. I mean, it just makes me sound like I'm such a... It makes me sound like I really can't decide what I think about Creator. And that's fine, because I guess I can. I don't know if I think he's a fantastic Protoss and super dependable, or if he's the least dependable and can't win any group, you know? Like, it flip-flops, all right? But I did think that the complications in this matchup, which Creator has expressed frustrations with, would impact his ability to win against Gumiho, and I do believe that the games displayed in the first series were actually far more vulnerable than it let on for Creator. Creator won some of those games, but a lot of those games had even big opportunities for Gumiho to actually take them. By the way, if you are interested in supporting GSL and specifically the Korean pro gamers by giving them more money, and do go to patreon.com/GSL. You'll also get these replays, which is why I'm casting them. It's how I'm casting them, as well as some other like behind the scenes stuff. So definitely check that out. The money of the Patreon all goes to the prize pool, which eventually gets added on to the player payout. So TVP, High Ground Command Center, playing it safe, going directly into a tech lab. Gumiho's done this before. I'm trying to think of what he does afterwards. He has gone into Marauder slow openings, interestingly enough. Which I don't know if I like, but he has done them. It should be Marauder slow. The thing is that actually not a point in faking it. You see a tech lab with the factory not immediately behind it. And you know that should be a Marauder. I think it's usually with slow and a second Marauder, but I don't see slow started up yet. The Marauder does make the early harassment options of the Protoss a little more complicated, because obviously when it comes to the Adept versus Marine fights, you know, it's we're counting the Adept shots and the number of Marines accessible to the Terran in the early game. And usually the Adept just kind of overpowers the production at the very beginning, which is why a bunker is necessary. But Marauders are so tanky that they don't kill Adepts fast, the Adepts don't kill them very fast. So they do help to defer the early game harassment. However, Crater actually wasn't too eager to go into that harassment. He actually went for a Stalker first, then Adept, then Stalker, if I'm not mistaken. So like his priority wasn't on doing damage, right? Like his priority is literally just on scouting, which is the Adept's main job, no matter which order you get them in. But yeah, it's a little bit more of an awkward opener because two Marauders are going to be helpful in the early and mid game. I don't think they're bad units in this case, but they do cost a pretty penny, right? And the tech lab instead of the reactor, so you have a later reactor, and they probably delay. They gotta delay something. They didn't delay the factory, really, but they gotta delay something. It just didn't seem like it really did a lot. Maybe what it was hoping to do. Or maybe it doesn't really matter. Let me just move on. Medevac's going out to the front to actually get some scouting done. Oh, and the Wood of Mines, I see. We're already traveling. And the Adept sees that. So I believe that is Creator's only real vision. Real scouting on what the follow-up was after the tech lab opener. I guess that's also what the Marauder opener does. It's very ambiguous. They could have transferred the Cyclone, the factory, onto a tech lab for a faster Cyclone. But it is a Wood of Mine drop, and Creator was able to get that scout without even actually getting close to Gumiho's base, which is a little bit of a bummer for Gumiho, I think. Creator has gone into three gateways again. It seems like the 2 gateway expand is a thing of the past, officially. We either have 4 gateways for the attack, or we have 3 gateways to bolster the potential Stalker counts. So whether it's offensive or defensive is depending on the circumstances. But you do still get the 3rd base. It's really not dedicated to. And Charge is on the way actually very quickly in this game. Something that he would sometimes delay. For instance, I believe it was the first game of the first series in which he went for the 2-base Templar Archives in later Charge. Stalkers do want to pressure on the fronts. At the very least, they could get up in the Warp Prism and get one shot with 4 Stalkers. The Creator might have seen that it was a 1-1-1 Medevac Widow Mine drop. What he didn't see was that it was a faster second barracks. So this isn't a 7-minute push out, right? With a decent amount of units. It's sitting at 6 minutes with less, but the timing of it could still make this very awkward for Creator to defend. As he has 4 Stalkers hitting the main base, he will grab a couple of SCVs, but does he have the means to defend his natural, which Gumiho just goes right to, by the way, and that's a 1 pylon powering 2 gateways. This one might power the Robo. I'm not even sure about that. It does not. It does not. That is a big problem. That Immortal would be very helpful. The Wood of Mine's also getting a burrow on top of the Stalkers. Good blink away, and the probes so far have lived. The Stalkers, however, maybe not. Now target firing the Cyclone and the Medevac. Finally, the probe starting to go down as well. Creator going to take big damage on his economy. But as far as the army trade goes, Gumiho did just sacrifice a lot. Warp Prism apparently went down too, which actually I think is the biggest bummer out of all of everything that just happened. I actually think the Cyclone, the Warp Prism going down, was kind of the biggest bummer. Creator, though, now may be more comfortable with the knowledge that the army of the Terran, a little less, actually grabs a fairly fast 4th base. He does seem, I'm almost like in disbelief right now. It does seem like he's going into the low gas mass gateway Protoss play, which really seemed to be a thing of the past. I'm very surprised to see this. I like it because it's my favorite style of play, but from what I understand, it has become almost defunct. It just isn't good enough. But I hope Creator makes it work. So no gases except the ones in the main base to give you just enough gas to get like technology, a couple of immortals, maybe a sentry for Guardian Shield, and then just a lot of expansions and a lot of charge lots specifically, because this also will take away gas from any potential stalker counts. It really, sometimes you go up to 3 gases and you can make a decent number of stalkers alongside those charge lots, but with 2, it's really all about the charge lots, which is something that Creator was doing, but in different ways in the first series. He was emphasizing charge lots in 2 out of the 3 games in the beginning, I believe, but different type of emphasis. That is a very odd place for an armory. Creator might have 4 bases, but his probe count is not particularly good. Well, no, again, this goes back to the gases. Like, the probe count doesn't look good, but it doesn't have to be that high because the gases aren't taking up 6, 12, 18 probes, right? So that's something to consider. The biggest problem for this style of play is that, especially what Creator is doing, like, very specifically, he's not gone for any upgrades whatsoever. If you do just basically produce charge lots, you can absolutely add on a forge. You might even be able to add on double forge, actually. You'd have like no sentries and no immortals and no stalkers, but you could. But he has actually gone forge-less for a very long time and is now making a transition. So he's got his gases up and is going over into Colossus, I expect. Warp Prism was once again made and is once again going for some harassment Zealot bombs this time. And he is raiding to defend against the drop, but he missed it entirely. I just coincidentally moved back to the main base. I didn't even see this on the minimap. One goes into the gas guys, the other one hits the probes. Not too shabby. Natural now protected. As Creator realized what was up. They are both tracking around for an engagement. Actually, Gumiho wasn't really looking for an engagement. He was just trying to get his army in position. His medevacs are not here. It's a bit more awkward for the Terran, as Gumiho is also under threat in his main base. A couple of the Wood Mines tried to safeguard the SCV line, but the Warp Prism still alive and well. Warps in more charge lots. Not effective charge lots, to be fair, but the Warp Prism survives and could be recalled out. If the Liberator gave chase anyways. It doesn't, so I guess it doesn't have to. Zealots might not have done a whole lot of damage, but they do distract, and this one's even going to get a couple of extra STV kills because Gumiho doesn't realize he left 1 Marine to deal with it. There you go. 1 Marine, 1 medevac. Easy peasy. Colossus have been made. First one is out. Second one on the way. Upgrades finally being gotten as well for the Protoss, as Gumiho does lead the upgrades 1-1 to 0-0. Perhaps finally able to push as well. The last series they played was fairly similar to this one. It is a different build order, but it is fairly similar. The lack of upgrades for Creator, emphasis on charge lots, and the very tightrope type of transition over into Colossus, or in one game it was Storm. That's just the way the Creator's playing today, apparently. Big old drop into the main base. Gumiho playing awfully risky. Is going to successfully unload. The question is, will he take a successful fight? Some army units go up to the north to try and take care of the probes. I'm not sure Creator's expecting that. The recall happened as well as the reinforcements, and Gumiho, he's going to take a decent enough fight, and he's going to be able to skedaddle, which is quite important. Creator did not have any units over on this 4th base, but he did pull the probes, so at least save their lives, and hopefully will save them. There we go. Wouldn't mind buying some time. As the probes do not pull themselves far enough away. Hello? Run! What the hell? 14 probes do go down. Probably more like 6 or 8 should have been the limits. And Creator now finds himself behind by 9 workers, but still on 4 bases, and his army remains rather intact. He managed to at least save all of his very expensive units, of course the Colossus, and actually even the Stalker count, right? Much of the loss was probably in charge lots. So I'd say he's still okay. If Gumiho had a follow-up attack hitting right now, I would be concerned for Creator, but Gumiho is nowhere close to attacking the main base of... not a main base, a fourth base, a base of Creator. Now he is setting up to do so. He's got EMPs, he's got a couple of Vikings, which are going to be a nuisance, and the shield battery either was never created or it was sniped from earlier. And Creator, this is still problematic. You know, Creator had like 10 extra seconds to try and build up an army to defend against this. Has he actually gotten to the army necessary? Upgrades still favoring Gumiho as well. EMPs did blanket the army once again, hitting the Immortal here, and the Vikings did do a decent job at trying to take down the Colossus. However, the shield battery on the right side helped save this one, and this one barely not dying means that Creator might have a second chance at life, but that was the follow-up attack that I was talking about, that I was worried about, and Gumiho was able to actually find the timing to deliver potentially a killing blow. Now he is no doubt in the lead as he has a fourth base building on location. He might not be on the best economy whatsoever, but he has made sure that Creator never is either. Creator was an okay economy for his purposes when he was mass charge lot, but once he started to add on technology and add on all these gases, well then yes, you do absolutely need more than 55 probes. So Creator is in a little bit of trouble, down 30 supply. Gumiho has given himself a 40 army supply lead, actually. Yeah. And the technology of Gumiho is still rather convincing. His upgrades, that is, and then his ghost EMPing. Creator would really want to be moving on to disruptors at this point. And instead, he's on the kind of still basic Protoss army, which can do the trick if it's really well positioned with shield batteries. And that's exactly what Creator needs to depend on right now. He's actually emphasizing an Immortal. I would definitely not mind a Disruptor. An Immortal can be a surprising, like, lineman to the Protoss army. It's never the highlight, but it's definitely important. But I would say a Disruptor might be even more useful. Ooh, a supply block, stopping him from building 2 Immortals at a time. Trying to chrono the upgrades to try and catch up, but he was never able to afford a second Forge because he's been on the defense, on the back foot this entire time. As Gumiho has been rather comfy on his side of the map. 6 SCVs did go down. I'm not sure to what, but I'd say he's rather comfortable. Fourth base into a planetary, guarding against DTs. The supplies have started to match each other a little bit more. Only a 15 army supply difference now is a far cry from just 30 seconds ago, so Creator did manage to hold on just long enough. I'd still say that momentum-wise, Gumiho still has the lead, because again, Creator does not have any disruptors. And I would respect Creator if he's trying to prove that disruptors are not necessary, or are not the best option here. But I would have to disagree with him, or, you know, say, like, maybe the GSL is not the time to prove that they're not good. Because I actually don't know why he's not going to do disruptors. I definitely think he could have afforded it instead of these Immortals. And I absolutely believe disruptors are a crucial unit in PvT. I do not think they're optional. But Creator is out here trying to make it look like they are optional. Because you could bring up the downside of disruptors too, but the fact is Creator had finally gotten to a stable point in which he had 4 bases and enough supply to spread around. That is where every other Protoss would go into disruptors. Because disruptors don't just get the hits, they also buy the time. I don't know. Creator with a strong army himself, especially as the upgrades kind of get a little more even. A clutch save on the Nexus, by the way. I actually thought it was a goner. That's why I wasn't hyping it up. I was like, that's dead. He actually did save it. DT also getting some shots in, helping out, and Gumiho might be spreading his army a little too thin, or maybe it's perfect. Nexus will finally die. It seems inevitable with the 2 armies trying to pull Creator 3 different directions, actually, dropping the main base as well. Nexus does go down finally, and that was where the overcharge was put into, so no overcharge on this side of the battle. EMP is hitting the majority of the army. That's an awfully small bio army, despite the upgrades. 3-2 versus 2-1, actually. A lot of the Bio army staying stronger there than you would have expected, but eventually getting cleaned up, and Gumiho did perhaps over-dedicate on this attack. You know, this attack, it was, I guess, sacrificial, one of the Nexus, but this attack did not get the opportunity to retreat, and that's a little painful. Especially as Gumiho did not manage to macro as well as he could have. He has money in the bank and not a whole lot of supply on the ground. This is very familiar to the first series, which I just kind of felt like Gumiho had more ways to win than Creator did, but then Creator chose the right way to win at the right time, and so won the series. This is actually looking very similar to that. This is Creator's chance. He's lost his 4th base, he's about to lose his 5th, but Gumiho did not have the production necessary to macro up after that kind of faulty attack. And Creator still has these 3 Colossus, which, I mean, they're not going to kill Marauders particularly quickly, and there's no Vikings to handle them. 3 Immortals also trying to be the backbone once again, get the EMP'd, and now they are on the front lines, getting taken down. The Marauders are doing their job, staying healthy against the Colossus, and that was actually not that scary at all. I was way more scared than I should have been. I was thinking back to the previous series in which Creator did come out with some clutch victories, but Gumiho with the Marauder counts, the Medevac counts, and the upgrades, 3-2 versus 2-1, coming in from multiple directions, was exactly what he needed to take game number 1 in this best of 3. In the top left, we have Gumiho. In the bottom right, it is Creator. Creator finding a lot of scary situations in that last game. You know, the emphasis and the highlight was the last scary situation, in which he counterattacked as his last chance, but he really was in a dangerous position, I would say, the entirety of that game. Even when he kind of stabilized, I was starting to give him a little bit of crap about the Disruptor thing, and I still would. You know, and not just because he lost. I'm not going to look at that and say the reason you lost is because you didn't make Disruptors. I don't think it's that black and white, but I would absolutely still say that if Creator thinks that Disruptors are not the way to go in these matchups, I think he's wrong. You know, and I try to be very careful to say when a pro gamer is wrong, because they're 1,000 times better than I'll ever be. And they usually have a very good reason for what they're doing that I just don't understand. But they are not invulnerable to criticism. They do have hang-ups and biases and whatnots. There's no doubt about it that... Ooh, not parting. Hold on here. Patience. There we go. Patience blinks were bad. They just were. You can say that without having to bow down before the guy who's 5,000 MMR above you, you know? So I just don't know. Like, I really want to be more enthralled by the decision than I am. But I really think Disruptors are such a great unit, and it's such a important unit for Protoss, which is why I also don't agree with them being, like, nerfed or taken out of the game. And again, not because of their ability to get one-shot 30 kills, which everyone points out, right? So they are great comeback units, for sure, but I don't think they're such a great comeback unit that if someone's down 50 supply, that's their only Hail Mary. I actually think for like that last game, for instance, with Creator down 40 supply, a solid, dependable setup of Colossus, Army, and shield batteries is better than trying to go for the Hail Mary Disruptors. But I do think that if you're going into the later stages of PvT, that Disruptors are crucial for the effect that they give, which is the effect is basically that the Terran can no longer dive on top of you. You know, they always have to be wary that you're paying attention and the Disruptor's about to shoot out their balls, and then they have to go, okay, fair enough. And then eventually, ideally for the Protoss, they get enough balls thrown out on the Terran's face there, and the Terran says, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna back away entirely because this is getting too heated. And then that's when the Protoss takes map control. That's when the Protoss goes into that Stalker Disruptor phase, and they actually are the ones being the biggest bullies. And Creator just really does not seem to want to do that. Very specifically, because you remember the first game of the first series, he actually, I think, had a really big opportunity to go into that composition. He did not. But then he also decided to go and set into a faster Stargate, which I think is fine, but he never used it. It's like Creator really doesn't want to be aggressive against Terran past the first, 8 or 9 minutes. Like, he wants to do mass charge a lot and be aggressive, and that's fine. But then afterwards, he's like, I'm not lethal anymore. Which, I think there is a little bit more back and forth in the majority of TVPs that we see here. in 2023. There's a little more of like, well, the Terran gets to push a little bit, and then the Protoss gets to say like, hey, I have this going for me. The Terran has to go into fan, and the Terran pushes, and then they go into the other thing, and then it's back and forth, back and forth. I don't know. I again say that Creator made a fine decision as far as stabilizing on those 4 bases. Excellent ability to stabilize in a game that was very difficult for him after the opener. But as he did settle on almost 5 bases, perhaps a disruptor or 2 flying out on the, let's say this was the attack zone. You know, this was the 4th base, this was the 5th, or 3rd and 4th rather. If he had disruptors flying out, I think the Terran player has to give a little more hesitation. But I'm done with it, I'm moving on. Swear to God, I'm moving on. Medevac coming in here with 3 Widowmine drops. Actually completely wide open main base. Okay, now Creator's responding. And this is a fairly fast blink. It's actually already done. So a lot of chronos went into that. It is a 3-gate once again. Creator's preference, by the looks of it. Is that the pigeon from Mike Tyson's Mysteries? There's an emote in chat, but I just did not expect to see someone reference Mike Tyson's Mysteries. It's still such a small, unknown show. I got distracted. Apparently there's a 4th Widowmine on the left side. I have no idea where the hell that came from. Creator is going into 4 gases on his 2 bases, so this is should not be a very quick 3rd Nexus. Oh, he's going to do what he did in the last series. This is the 2-base storm play. Yeah. We're good. Blink is ready, so... Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god! Good on Gumiho to continue microing right there. He almost got Creator slipping. Fortunately, Creator did pay attention. He was trying to get micro on the other side of the map, seems to be the problem. He was trying to clean things up lickety-split to focus on his aggression, which almost cost him all of his probes. It also wasn't particularly good aggression. Yeah, he didn't lose a Stalker, so that was just 3 Stalkers in there. That's not an ideal number for anything. Doesn't one-shot Marines or SCVs. Kind of weird. I was looking to kill a supply depot, I guess. Medevac once again gonna try and get into the natural this time around. Ooh, I miss the feedback killing a Medevac, you know? It used to kill Medevacs no matter what, basically. And then it got changed, so you don't see it very much anymore. But now that was also a scout for Gumiho, who without that feedback with the High Templars on the natural might not have realized it is Templar Archives. He might have been more suspicious of it than against anyone else, because Creator did this already in Game 1 of their first series. Usually Terrans would see all 4 gases on 2 bases and say, okay, it's going into Colossus, but Creator has shown this, so... But now he knows for sure. It's Storm on the way, War Prism flying around. Again, very late charge. He could have easily not gotten 1 extra High Templar. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought he had 5. Okay, no, so you want 4. Never mind. So he could have maybe gotten not the Immortal, but rather Charge. However, he does emphasize the Immortal, which, if it works, it works. Most importantly, we're looking at what the Storms can do. Last time this happened, it was actually very surprising to Gumiho, yet he did manage to not take the worst Storms ever. And now he actually knows that it is Storm. He is making sure to be pre-split. His Raven could go for the interference, because once again, something that did kind of ruin Creator's ideal engagements. This time around, Creator had 2 in the Warp Prism that actually got to shoot their shots, and 2 on the ground. Not as protected, especially against those tanks, but we won't have to worry about disables. And that's actually really the current problem. These tanks are helping to ward away the High Templars, and this is usually where charge lots are so crucial. This is actually, like, I actually harped on this in the first game, but it ended up being okay. This time around, the attack is here long before charge is done, and the tanks are able to really heavily impact this fight. It's actually making... He almost got his own tank. It's actually making the fight easier to have 3 tanks sieged up like this on a very charge-less army. Like, that actually is just like, it's an easy equation, right? But when charge lots get involved, not only do they tank a lot more, but they also envelop, they surround, they get on top of you, so the tanks become a little less effective. So that's the late charge thing really is quite concerning against someone who has shown an insistence on getting 3 tanks every single TVP. But once again, seems to be okay. Creator does buy enough time to get the charge. And now it is just a matter of getting enough units in the correct location. As a couple of units do go down to the Marauder harassment. A sentry went down, actually. Quite expensive when you're trying to also add on High Templars. Winter Mines have also joined in, which is something that did not exist mere seconds ago and are now crucial to handling the charge lots. Shield Battery Overcharge popped as he expected to take the battle, but that's not even going to affect the battle, really. He goes in again because Disable was actually gone, but a second Disable was available. Still 2 Storms available for the overall fight. Seem to be doing the trick as Gumiho is just shy of having enough units to hold on here. 3 Marauders also going to lose their lives. A hefty sum, really. Expensive and slow building. However, it looks like Creator did not win that fight well enough to actually get a counterattack in. Gumiho still within the his means to be aggressive, to have his army on the map, although it is a little sus without the Medivacs. This Medivacs out of energy, and there are no other Medivacs on the field. So yeah, probably disengage, probably just admit defeats temporarily. 3rd CC is about to be saturated. And with more Medivacs, his army will look much more complete. More Medivacs, more Winter Mines, and all these ghosts that he was already building. Creator manages to hold on to his 3-base setup with the High Templar Storm, but we know the next big problem for the Protoss is moving away from that Storm. That Storm is going to get more and more counterable with the EMPs and just the size of the armies and so on and so forth. Also, it's a lot more difficult to really handle the more stuff happens in the game. The Warp Prism Micro is no joke. So the Colossus are really the way to go here, and that is a tough transition. Takes a while. And 1 Colossus hardly is the transition. You really want to be at 2 before you feel powerful. And hey, look at this! Somewhere across the universe, there's also a time tunnel where a creator heard me yelling about disruptors and finally made disruptors. This game was played yesterday, so it doesn't really make any sense. But that's why the time tunnel exists. Recall on the Observer, I assume. Maybe an Immortal by accident. As the armory is finished. Gumiho getting a little distraction, setting up an attack on the right side. He's got the EMPs heading first and foremost. That's a pretty juicy storm. Very injured units. However, many of them still barely alive. This is where the medevac healing really needs to come into play. Many of them still weakened. Another sim's going to have to be used. Gumiho does not have the staying power, which I think he has realized. Zealot's also about to hit the 3rd base, which is being responded to pretty quickly, and because his units survived, although just barely, he is at an okay supply. This is seriously 1 storm away from losing many, 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 many units. Gumiho has been lulled into a false sense of security when it comes to expecting what Robo unit will be created. He's making Vikings, and there are no Colossus on the field. This is actually kind of the dangerous thing to do. Like, I'm all for Creator going for the first 3 or 4 Colossus, because that seems to be what he likes. But then after is usually when you get to Disruptors. Going into Disruptors immediately as your transition unit from Storms is actually kind of adding the same type of AoE, if you will. That is to say, it's not necessarily dependable. Colossus are dependable. They're boring, but they're dependable. They get the shots. They laser beam. High Templars either get EMP'd or the Storms can be like pseudo-dodged, right? They don't last the entire storm. And then Disruptors can literally be dodged. So it's kind of a dangerous composition. It's a lethal composition, but it also can be vulnerable. It also is extremely hard to split with Disruptors, which could still be an issue as we're not quite maxed out. We're pretty much getting there though, so I don't think that's an issue. So all in all, Creator has gotten to the maxed out army. Disruptors over Colossus this time, and I'm all for it. I think if he does take a decent battle, he can then do the more, he can do the counterattack into more of the map control that has been missing from his PvTs that exist in most other PvTs. I try very hard as a commentator to never rely on my own games, and that's very easy now because I barely play the game. But I always try to just think of what happens in every other PvT. And yeah, it's mostly going down to Stalker Disruptor at this point. And this is exactly what you would be doing, usually with a bigger army though. It's not a lot of Stalkers. Also, the upgrades are still rather poor. Disruptors do not care about upgrades, but nonetheless, usually the Stalkers have at least +2, only just now researching. Gumiho is at 2-1 versus +1, so in a straight-up battle without the disruptors, his bio army is better. Shield by overcharge once again looking to clutch save the Nexus, but it's not going to happen. And the disruptor had to avoid killing its own zealots, so nice sight there from Gumiho. Creator with no vision on the left side. Just loses a Nexus and is also starting to bleed out some units. Disruptors could be target fired, and they are. It costs the army a lot of its health because it had to sit under that storm, but that's where the medevacs were finally in good enough numbers to push through, to persevere. But the chase is on, and the chase will eventually end in Creator's favor. That's much too much army. Observers are around, so I love the Ghost Cloak, but it does not work, and that will also cost him a lot of medevacs, but thankfully Gumiho this time around is very on point with the medevac production. 8 are still available, EMP is still available, and would have mind with some excellent scouting. Could have killed a unit, of course, but I think more importantly got the scout the disruptors are looking for a back attack, because Gumiho was probably more than eager to take the engagement as long as there weren't disruptors. If they had suddenly surprised him on the backside, it would have been caught in a trap. And Gumiho has a solid army supply, but he is on his own third base trying to defend someone who has disruptors, and that is usually where it gets really complicated. SCVs are pulled away. Third CC is a goner. Gumiho has got a little bit of a run by, and something's better than nothing, but Gumiho is now also dealing with the army encroaching on his natural Liberator transition far too late to actually be helpful. Quick snipe on the one Liberator that was available. Gumiho trying to set up somewhat of a concave, making sure that Creator can't go any further. He does have a fourth base over here, turned into a planetary, and a fifth. So that loss of the third isn't the worst thing, as long as he has some time to recover. Disruptor is not going to find very much. That one neither. This one also. Oh, that one's going to find a lot. Fourth time is the charm, apparently. Gumiho's Liberators once again left all by its lonesome, so the Stalkers are more than eager to blink in. Disruptors still have their shots to ward away the bio. A bit of a surround coming in, however, as Gumiho looks to take the fight. The Disruptors are gone, but the remnants of the Protoss army seem to be enough. Gumiho, too low of a supply to actually make this work. Planetary also was not involved until the very last seconds, and Gumiho will be losing game number 2. Losing control of the momentum of the back and forth. The map control eventually going to the Protoss' side is where really the Stalker Disruptor competition really shines. And that is that. GG. Creator, once again, one game away from advancing. Who will it be? The last game of GSL Group C, round of 16. In the bottom right of Babylon, it is Creator. In the top left, we have Gumiho. I'm happy to see that Creator is very capable of playing that style. Part of me was starting to worry that the reason he didn't do it was because he wasn't good with it. He wasn't confident with it. And he might still not be confident with it, but I do know that there are times where some pro gamers... Like, you know, this is actually very common amongst the lower leagues. Basically, people admit they can't use Vipers, so they don't use Vipers. Like, they're not good because they know that they will not be able to use them well. And while it doesn't really happen in the same sense in the pro gaming scene, like the pros really should never be like, well, I can't do this. Like, I'm literally incapable of microing these units. That should never happen. They're not a very good pro if that's the case. I do think that there's still a situation where the pros say, whenever I do this, it never works. So even though I know other people do it all the time, I don't know how. I don't know how it works. And we have heard that from pros. And then eventually, if the meta stays the same, they do eventually kind of figure it out and also adopt the common meta. So, I don't know, maybe Creator is kind of having that dilemma where he's like, look, whenever I do it, it doesn't really work out. I can't really choose the correct timing to do it. My attacks don't seem to ever work. I always get too overeager and then I lose. And so I just don't want to do it. But I'm really happy that he did it. And so that is also in the back of Gumiho's mind for this game. So he knows that Creator can go into 2-base Colossus or 2-base Storm. He knows that Creator can go into a, let's say, 4-base solid defensive Colossus setup, or 4-base more aggressive Disruptor setup, looking for that one opportunity to get that map control. As opposed to perhaps the final game leading into one of the more passive games, like the last series they played, Game 1, in which the opener actually wasn't passive, but basically things settled to a point where they both could macro to a supreme late game. And then Creator did play, I would argue, too passively with it. You know, if Gumiho were to assume that and be correct on that, should this game go past 14 minutes, that just makes life easier for him, right? Where if Creator could have that back pocket, you know, Colossus or Disruptors or straight into Stargate play, Gumiho has to consider that a little bit more. Of course, I'm talking about what Creator can or cannot do. Creator also has to worry about what Gumiho can or cannot do. So far, Gumiho has been playing very similar styles, right? Not too much of a difference. Even in the game that eventually ended in Battle Cruisers, he had a huge emphasis on his bio. Although he did also transition faster than I expected into Liberators, thinking back on it. He didn't really push like the maxed out Marauder Snowball type of play. But for the most part, his EVPs have been yeah, fairly typical. What am I drop into the bio play? He did try a Banshee build, so it's not the complete same, but kind of coming down to a very similar type of game. This one is slightly different. We do have a tank on the way instead of Wood of Mines. This could be how he opened into the Banshees. I don't remember. We'll see in 1 second. Tech Lab? Tech Lab? Tech Lab? Medevac. Interesting. So Medevac with a couple of Marines and a Cyclone pressuring the front, perhaps. Creator has gone into 3 gateways. Not a big fan of the 4 gate, and I don't think Gumiho has displayed any particular weakness to the 4 gate either. If Gumiho was immediately going into pure Widowmine production right off the bat, no tanks produced, then I'd say that Creator would be missing an opportunity not to throw in a 4 gate. But Gumiho has actually been very... he's been, not stubborn. He's been very interested in tank pushes. You know, he's almost always gone up to 3 tanks, where, again, many other Terrans would stop at 2, 4-gate defense, or they'd even try to skimp and only stay on 1. But Gumiho likes his 3 tanks. This is a completely different build. Gumiho going for an early game attack. Medevac bringing along that 2nd tank. Creator having no idea this is on the way. He does have a shield battery, but he's building a War Prism right now, which would not be the most helpful thing. He wants an Immortal. This is actually going to be really quite dangerous. Gumiho perhaps realizing that Creator has done a similar opener every single time, looks at the situation and says, that's not a lot of units. That's not a lot of map presence. If I can hit this one timing, I might be able to do some pretty freaking good damage, and he might be right about that. The Stalker's awfully clumped up, taking lots of damage. One more tank shot is going to obliterate these Stalkers, and Creator just was so ill-prepared for the attack. The fact of the matter is, with 3 gateways, he's usually capable of defending such attacks, but he needs to be out on the map. If his Stalkers were in a concave, chipping away at the Marines, and then catching them before the tanks were sieged up, he probably is fine. But he was not in the position to do that. He was still expecting a Widowmine drop because the Stalkers came down from the main base. This was a dangerous thing to do from Gumiho because the 3 gateways, I think, again, could have been an answer to such an early game attack. If the map control is there from the Protoss, this could have looked maybe even silly. But if Creator was going to wait until that War Prism every single time to get out on the map and be under the impression that it is a Widowmine drop as well, then Gumiho knows there is one attack that can get into Creator's natural base and get sieged up and set up. Oh, no. I predicted this, but I don't like seeing it. Creator inches away from advancing to the round of 8 twice. It's gonna miss out. What a sad, sad story. He's certainly not a player who gives up easily. If there's 10% chance of winning, he'll try. But this one's actually even more concrete than his last game versus Dark, which had a little bit more mystery to it. Oh, I mean, really good, smart play from Gumiho there. I would say it's actually a very risky play. High risk, high reward. But that's what you gotta do. A high stakes game of StarCraft 2. DTs were made. I do like this emergency response. I actually really like this emergency response. As soon as he realized he was screwed on the front lines, he slapped down that Dark Shrine. But there are 2 orbitals, there are missile turrets, and there could be a Raven created. And the Stalkers have all died. The DTs have all died. Creator down to 17 workers, 11 army supply on 1 base. Gumiho would have to make some huge mistakes to lose this. And I have no doubts that Creator was appearing fairly emotional on the webcam. Poor Creator. Also, poor Protoss. Right? Have any Protoss advanced? Classic didn't advance in Group A. Who was in Group B? Well. That is it. GG. A sad story for a Creator, but it is going to be Gumiho who advances on here. Hero did advance. That's right. Hero did advance. Although it was a bit sketchy for him. So we do have 1 Protoss in the round of 8, but Creator got so freaking close and could not quite do it. First defeated by Dark, really his nemesis at this point, and then defeated perhaps by the rematch curse. Which, if you don't believe in it by now, after these last 2 seasons, I don't know what to tell you. It's pretty much a fact at this point. It's good on Gumiho to advance on. Again, one of the only teamless players. I think he's the only teamless player in GSL right now. So he'll move on to the round of 8s alongside Dark. And there's 1 more group to be played out for the round of 16, which will be playing out tomorrow morning. So hopefully I get the replays ASAP. Thanks for watching, everyone. For people on YouTube, please like, subscribe, follow, all the good stuff. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.